We have a quorum, so we'll move into public session. We have a quorum and I call the meeting to order. The committee is now in public session. And just apologies to the witnesses. I know we had to hold you up there for a few moments. We normally don't like to keep people waiting. So thanks for your patience. We have apologies from Deputy Imelda Munster. You're all very welcome, and remind all those in attendance to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or on silent. Before we start, I wish to explain some limitations to parliamentary privilege and practices of the Houses as regards reference you make to other persons in your evidence. The evidence of witnesses physically present or who give evidence within the parliamentary precincts is protected pursuant to both Constitution and statute by absolute privilege. As you're within the precincts of Leinster House, you're protected by absolute privilege in respect of the presentations you make to the committee. This means that you're in absolute defence against any defamation action for anything that you say at the meeting. However, you're expected not to abuse this privilege, and it's my duty as Cock-Peerlock to ensure that it's not abused. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you'll be directed to discontinue your remarks, and it's imperative that you comply. Members are also reminded of Standing Order 218 that the committee shall refrain from inquiring into the merits of a policy or policies of the government or minister of the government or the merits of the objective of such policies. Members are also reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official leader by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. Furthermore, it's not the role of the committee to make findings of fact about a person who is not a member of the Oireachtas that could impinge on their good name or reputation. I would ask members to be mindful of this in your examination of the issues in question. Today we're joined by the Controller and Auditor General, Seamus McCarthy, who is a permanent witness to the committee. He's accompanied this morning by Ms Mary Henry, Deputy Director of Audit at the Office of the Controller and Auditor General. This morning we're going to engage with Inland Fisheries Ireland to examine their financial statements 2021. And we're joined by the following representatives of Inland Fisheries Ireland: Mr Francis O'Donnell, Chief Executive Officer; Ms Susan Campion, Head of Finance and Corporate Services; Mr Barry Fox, Head of Operations; Mr Kyle Gallagher, Head of Research and Development; and Ms Roisin Bradley, Head of Human Resources. We're also joined by the following officials from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications: Mr Dennis Marr, Principal Officer. So, to begin with, I'm going to call on the Controller and Auditor General, Seamus McCarthy, for his opening statement.
Inland Fisheries Ireland was established in 2010, amalgamating the previous regional fisheries boards with the Central Fisheries Board. Its remit is to protect, manage and conserve Ireland's inland fisheries and sea angling resources. IFI's income in 2021 amounted to €31.7 million. This was down from €36.9 million in 2020. Around three-quarters of the income comes from Exchequer grant funding, and the grant income was down in 2021, mainly to reduce IFI's high cash balance at the end of 2020. IFI expenditure in 2021 amounted to €36.8 million, and this was up from €33.9 million in 2020. Over 70% of expenditure, or €26.6 million, was in respect of remuneration and other pay costs. €8.6 million was spent on operations, with €1.6 million on administration. I certified the 2021 financial statements on the 29th of March 2023 and issued a clear audit opinion. However, I drew attention to a number of items in my audit report. First, I drew attention to certain governance concerns. The chairperson of the IFI board resigned in April 2022. A new chairperson was appointed in May 2022 and resigned in January 2023. There were a further 4 resignations from the board during 2022 and in January 2023. As a result, the board became unable to reach the required quorum to meet and to make decisions, including approval of the annual financial statements. In February 2023, the remaining board members were removed by the Minister for the Environment, Climate and Communications on a no-fault basis, and 2 persons were appointed for a period of up to 6 months to perform the functions of IFI pending the reconstitution of the board. A number of disclosures were made in 2022 to the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications and to IFI. These disclosures resulted in the commissioning of a succession of reviews and reports. The Statement on Internal Control outlines the status of these reviews at the date of signing of the financial statements. Following one internal review, the Chief Executive reported a potential fraud to An Garda Síochána in 2022. Due to an administration error, 16 vehicles leased by IFI in 2021 were uninsured for a period. The matter only came to light when one of the vehicles was involved in a road traffic accident. IFI anticipates that illegal action may be taken against it over the incident. The financial liability accruing from the accident was uncertain at the time the audit was being signed off. Finally, I drew attention to a change in the Chief Executive's normal place of work from IFI's headquarters in Donegal to the regional office in Ballyshannon in November 2021. This has implications for the claiming of expenses by the Chief Executive. We found no contemporaneous written record of the proposal for the work location change or of its financial implications, or of a decision in that regard by the Board, which is responsible for setting the terms and conditions of the Chief Executive. The number and complexity of the issues that have arisen in IFI contributed to a delay in the completion of the audit of the 2021 annual financial statements. The audit of the 2022 annual financial statements is currently in progress, and I expect earlier completion of that work. Separately, my office is further examining a number of control and value for money issues in IFI, and I may present a report on any significant findings from that work if that is warranted.
Thanks, Seamus. And Mr. O'Donnell, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement. You wish to proceed?
Okay, imagine why a Cairlach agus a Jacti Dáil. Mai agat a sucht an jeis a bheith lethar an seo aniu chun éon cistne chuí a ragart a tá bunt acu le íoscach in Sir Éireann agus an ráiteas airgeideas don bhliain fios a héan. Ba bhhail am a chur aniuil a dús baia don ggóirle go bhfuil siar insin ag íoscach in Sir Éireann a bheith oscailte agus go dtí an bunte aniu. Muna bhfuil ma jabal a cistne a ragart, torí muid fragri a bhórm scrífa cholua agus is féidir. Thank you, Deputy Stanley and the Committee, for the opportunity to appear before you today and discuss our annual report for 2021 and financial statements. I am joined by supporting witnesses Barry Fox, Head of Operations, Suzanne Campion, Head of Finance and Corporate Services, Dr. Carl Gallagher, Head of Research and Development, and Roisin Bradley, Head of Human Resources. I will keep my remarks to some overarching topics and relevant issues regarding the financial statements and accounts for 21. We're a team of just over 300 full-time staff, comprising fisheries protection staff, development staff, environmental officers, research staff, and very importantly, an excellent administrative backup team. I am very grateful to our passionate and accomplished employees who see their roles as a vocation. Many have given decades of dedicated public service to Inland Fisheries Ireland and are national and international specialists in their respective fields. In 2021, our protection and environmental teams were extremely active in addressing illegal fishing, pollution incidents, fish kills, habitat destruction in and around freshwater systems across Ireland. IFI delivered over 167,000 hours of anti-poaching patrolling activities. We concluded 82 cases for fisheries offences and commenced a further 103 cases in 2021. We also concluded 23 cases for environmental offences and commenced a further 13 cases in the same period. Most of the latter were associated with fish kills and serious water pollution incidents. In 2021, IFI carried out river habitat restoration on 21 kilometres of river channel, treated 11 hectares of flake infested with lager siphon, an alien invasive aquatic plant species that has serious ecological impacts and may spread to other water bodies, and carried out maintenance on 34 kilometres of river channel habitat. In the same year, IFI staff audited 2,800 angler access structures and carried out maintenance on 510 structures to ensure that the public were safe. This is just a snapshot of what we did in 2021. IFI, like all public service organisations, must adhere to the highest standards in governance. IFI has made governance mistakes, which has overshadowed the excellent public service that we provide. The shortcomings in terms of good governance, for which we apologise today, were not deliberate and not deceitful in any way. Today we welcome this opportunity to explain the causes of these issues and provide the requisite background and context to the committee. It is important for the public to know this. Following extensive internal reviews of processes and procedures and associated remedial action, IFI is operating within a very strong corporate governance environment. The external governance review of IFI will commence shortly, and our Section 18 board appointees are overseeing this process. This will strengthen IFI governance processes to a very high standard. Separately, but in addition to these significant operational risks, we discovered alleged fraud within IFI in 2022, and this is now subject to a criminal investigation by An Garda Síochána. I believe this occurred over a significant amount of time in Inland Fisheries Ireland, but does not pertain to any serving staff member of IFI. The investigation also relates to the harassment and intimidation of the executive over a 17-month period, and this has taken its toll on my colleagues across IFI. I will endeavour to brief you all to the best of my ability on this issue. As this is a live Garda investigation, I will remain cautious in this matter. Inland Fisheries Ireland is overstretched and has been for a long time. Since 2009, our staffing complement has been reduced by 30%. We have the statutory responsibility for Ireland's 74,000 kilometres of rivers and streams, together with 128,000 hectares of lake systems. We patrol a coastline of 9,700 kilometres and patrol the marine environment out to 12 nautical miles from the baselines. Our area of operation is extensive. We face a significant operational challenges, especially the lack of staffing in specialist areas that impedes our ability to respond more effectively and efficiently to the pressing needs of an environmental agency in an ever-changing ecological world. These challenges are not an excuse for mistakes that have been made. The challenges are, however, a reality. Minister Ryan himself stated that IFI needs to be adequately resourced to build and sustain capacity for both existing functions and an enhanced role. 2021 was a very challenging year for IFI due to COVID-19 restrictions, and the last 18 months have been equally difficult for the organisation. Climate change, the pollution of our water bodies, the destruction of freshwater and terrestrial habitats, the proliferation of non-native invasive species, and the impacts of aquaculture on migrating salmonids is making our role extremely challenging as an environmental organisation. I myself was born in 1971, while salmon numbers returning to Ireland in that year were 1.2 million. In 2022, that number was reduced to 171,000, a reduction of 86%. Arctic char, a species that were encountered by the first inhabitants of this island, are now extinct from Lough Conn, County Mayo, and facing a similar fate in other lake systems. The freshwater eels that were once prolific in the streams that we played in as children are now facing extinction, while brown trout lakes across Ireland are disappearing due to the introduction of non-native species and the pollution associated with excessive farming practices. IFI must be expanded and strengthened so we can deliver on all that is required of us by extant national legislation and the ever-increasing burdens of EU directives and regulations. Those regulations serve to protect nature. Nature has no voice other than the human one. I am very proud of the progressive and innovative work that we do and the value it gives to the state, to our citizens and to the resource we protect. IFI could not do this without our committed staff, stakeholder support and the excellent support we receive daily from our parent department, the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communication. Just to finish, Chair, I and my team will address the committee's oral questions and will share with you any written information that members request in this session at the first available opportunity. Chair, thank you and the committee for your attention this morning.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. So the first committee member this morning is Deputy Mark Cossig with 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks to the witnesses for appearing today and for the opening statement. It's unfortunate we've no board members here today, but that's where we find ourselves. We have an organisation that is receiving 27 million in terms of exchequer funding, that doesn't have a functioning board in place, and you come here to PAC today to ask for an expansion in your services, or that's just part of the narrative. I was preparing for today, and I asked somebody where the IFI was headquartered. I didn't know the building. The reply I got was it's halfway between Ballymagash and Kilnascully. Now, that is not a good look for an organisation that's making a case here for increased staffing, increased funding. And I mean, a lot of the issues that we're going to address here, they sit very comfortably in the world of either Dunbelievables or Holt's Pictorial Weekly, if I'm honest about it. Like, even the corporate slogan invites an element of satire. It's about the fish, you know. The protective crews aren't getting out when they should do. We don't have the trained rib drivers to get out at the night time. We've invasive species that are left to get out of hand before they're brought back under control. We've lapsed insurance policies that aren't noticed until there's a crash. We've property leasing arrangement to employees that could be described as loose as best. So yeah, whatever about the fish, there's definitely something fishy happening here, you know. And as usual, and ever in this situation, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer that's going to be left on the hook here. So, I mean, we have a serious background then in terms of, we have a corporate governance structure that's in free fall, mass resignations from the board, leaving a board that's inchoate and non-functioning, so that the minister has to step in and take a nuclear option essentially. We have a series of internal reports, we've protected disclosures, we've a Garda investigation relating to serious allegations of fraud, we've questions around dormant accounts funding, and we just have a sense here that taxpayers' money has been thrown around like snuff at a wake, if I'm honest. And then we have the wider context, and that ask for increased staffing. There's no doubt that the role and remit of IFI is changing, and changing radically as we kind of respond to the urgency of the climate and the biodiversity crisis. We see increased pressures on our waterways, as you outlined in your opening statement. Our fish populations are in free fall as well. And I know Minister Ryan has called on you to be more ambitious, and there's a need for more ambition. And I think your business case to Mazars, you're talking about a 61% increase in terms of your staffing, so to go from the 320 or in around closer to 520. And I absolutely see the need for that level of ambition. And I'd love to be going to Minister O'Donoghue ahead of the budget and saying, look, IFI are asking for this extra ambition. You know, I support that, but it's difficult. And it's difficult as a member of the Oireachtas, it's difficult as a member of the PAC, and we've oversight of the spending of public money, to have confidence in an organisation and go make a case for increased funding. So look, there's a whole range of issues here, and I'm aware that time is limited. Mr. O'Donnell, I'm going to begin first with that issue around your work base and where you were working from. And I think there's questions here from Ms. Bradley as well, and from Ms. Campion. So what I have in the Statement of Internal Control, and the Controller and Auditor General takes issue with how adequately this is reflected, is that the decision to move to Ballyshannon was based on the fact that it was closer to Galway. Now, I'm very fond of Donegal, but that is the first time I've ever seen anybody make a case of moving to Donegal because it was closer to anything. It might be closer to Galway, but I mean, Inland Fisheries Ireland also operates in my catchment area of Waterford. That is not close to Donegal. It was agreed, I believe, by the head of HR, so Ms. Bradley, you signed off on this. Can I ask for the rationale first?
The rationale for that was, I suppose it was 2021, Deputy. We're in the middle of a pandemic. As the chief of the organisation, I was asking my staff to stay at home, work from home, and work from regional bases if possible. I mean, we would have staff normally based in Dublin, for example, in the research department. They could be from Cork, could be from Waterford. We have 7 regional offices. It made absolutely no sense to ask them to come in and, to HQ. It was only open once a week at that point. So I was living in Donegal. I would only have access to secure IT systems 1 day a week. At that point in time, I was also, I suppose, paying invoices on behalf of the taxpayer that ranged from 30,000 to 900,000. I didn't have a secure system at home to do that.
And you couldn't have opened up the secure system within Dublin? I mean, look, to case in point, my staff didn't travel to Dublin during the pandemic,
Deputy,
but I did.
Well, I would just like to explain, the office was only open 1 day a week, okay? So I would have to travel to Dublin once a week to undertake all of that work, whereas in most cases I would need 2 to 3 days working in a secure environment because I was handling various different sensitive issues within IFI.
I will just point out that your statement of internal control doesn't detail any of this.
It may not have detailed that.
And there's no contemporaneous written accounts.
But can I say it was agreed at that time by the chairperson and the head of HR. It was agreed. Now, the CNAG pointed clearly out that it should have gone to a full board decision. It was done with the best of intent. There was no malice intended. And it was done for the right reasons. And as soon as it was pointed out by the CNAG, I took corrective action on that. And I accept that.
That decision only to revert back to the Dublin HQ, that only happened when the Minister made the Section 18 appointees, am I right?
That's correct. Okay. The Section 18 appointees were their position on this was that once my base changed to Ballyshannon, my expenses were being signed off on by the then chair and obviously a second chair thereafter. And I suppose for the Section 18 appointees, they're concerned with the period from when they started.
Ms Campion, can I ask the question about the financial implications of that move? How much did it cost the taxpayer?
Just over €5,000 in terms of the amount spent during the period that the base was at Donegal, and since since the Section 18s were appointed, over €1,000 which has been repaid.
Okay, yeah. So up to 5,400 is the figure I have in front.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? And 1,000 of it has been repaid. 1,000
of the amount that was claimed since the Section 18s were appointed, and that's the full amount that was due.
Okay. I want to move on to this issue around the protection team. And the protection teams, well, the protection teams in general, but the protection team in Ballyshannon, in County Donegal in particular. And there was a difficulty identified with the activity of that protection team. Would you care to outline? Well, it might be a question for yourself, Mr. O'Donnell, but Mr. Fox might have a
Deputy, can I defer to Roisin Bradley on this one?
Yeah, I suppose I don't think it's appropriate. I should say, first of all, that our teams are very small, and I don't think it's appropriate to call out one particular team because the staff would be easily identifiable. What I would say to you is that...
But was there an investigation in the particular team? Was there not an internal process whereby...
There's no performance investigation with regards to Ballyshannon team, no.
Where was there, have I made an error there? Was there a performance investigation team in a different area?
No, what I would say to you is that there was some discussions about a number of areas around the country where they needed additional resources. So, for example, we'll choose the north because you've spoken about it. Our corporate plan had placed a focus on development, particularly around the assessment of barriers to fish migration and other development duties. Because our resources are so stretched, it's difficult to stretch them across the protection and the development. So there was some protection issues that I suppose we were concerned about. So we refocused the team. We put in a pilot scheme called a mobile support unit.
Mobile support unit, yeah.
Which basically put out a call of interest to staff if they wanted to participate, and the idea being that this would be a central mobile support unit that could go to any area in the country that needed additional resources. So just to be clear, there's no performance investigation into anyone in Ballyshannon.
Okay, I just want to turn to fleet management in particular. I think it's the second biggest expenditure outside of salaries. I understand the need for maintenance of fleet. I mean, your plant and equipment, the valuation comes to 21.4 million, which is substantial, but I can, to a certain extent, understand it. Just want to get the right page in front of me here. There's a question around how many vehicles are here. So how many people do you have in the field? I know you have 320 employees. How many of those employees are in the field?
It's slightly over 200.
Yeah, and then there's slightly over 200 vehicles.
I should say that there's also another 30 to 40 people in research, and they would also have vehicles as well. Because they do field work for 6 months of the year.
But we're pretty close to a one-on-one ratio in terms of vehicles too.
Yeah, I suppose what I would say to you is that we have we've done some research with other agencies which we would believe would be quite like us in terms of the use of vehicles, namely the Gardaí. And this was at the time that we decided we wanted to bring in a telematics system so that we could monitor each of the vehicles. So we were asking them, like, how do you manage the vehicle utilisation? And they said, well, the vehicle is a tool and we don't monitor the tool, we monitor the individual performance of the officer. So what I would say to you is that we do have 205 vehicles, but what I would say is that 31% of our fleet comprises of 4x4 crew cabs. These vehicles are utilised for specific heavy tow operations and off-road protection and development activities. 22% are SUVs, so for higher ground clearance and all-wheel drive, and 22% are cars and vans. And then we have a number of special types such as tractors and dumper trucks and stuff like that. So it's not a case that every employee has a vehicle.
No, look, we'd accept
Yeah.
that, and the type of work that IFI does,
Yeah.
I would accept the fact that there's the need for specialist vehicles.
Yeah.
It just seems a very high ratio.
Yeah.
It also seems that there's a very high figure included for general car hire, 350,000.
Yeah, I suppose again, we have done we spent a lot of time looking at what's the best way to meet the needs of the operations in line with what type of vehicles we need. And I suppose what we say is because we have a kind of what we would consider a high season between March and September, October, which is when we bring in our seasonal staff, our operations are out, so we've a lot more staff in that section of the organisation. Research are now out doing field work, and then obviously you have other staff then, such as say people in my team that might need to travel around the country. So we use pool cars. So the first thing I would say is that if somebody needed a vehicle to perform a duty, the first thing that they do is if they're in an operation team, there'll be a number of vehicles managed by the inspector locally. And if they're in research, usually there's either older vehicles that they use or we would lease in vehicles, and a lot of times they're externally funded through the research funds that they would be carrying out the work for.
Just in broad strokes, because
Yeah.
there's the guts of $500,000 that's been spent on fuel just for the cars. There's
Yeah.
the 350,000 which has been spent on car
Yeah.
hire. I mean, the size of the fleet means that depreciation is a very, very serious cost across
Yeah.
and I understand that there's need for that. But what I find astonishing about it is that a fleet manager was actually only put in place, considering the size of the fleet, after somebody had a crash in an uninsured vehicle.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that. What
Well,
we
is
had-
the timeline wrong?
Oh, no, let me just explain it insofar as we had what we called a logistics manager, and this logistics manager was responsible for fleet, which is cars, boats, trailers, and health and safety, and procurement, and facilities, and warehouse. We've so few
It's self-evident in the fact that there was 16 uninsured vehicles driving
Yeah.
around the place,
Yeah.
that there was a need for a fleet
absolutely.
manager.
Sorry, I
I just
agree.
want to ask a follow-on question in terms of the climate commitments
Yeah.
that you set out. So this is under, I have it someplace, I think it's high-level objective 4, and you talk about the type of reductions that we need to see in terms of carbon emissions across the organisation.
Yeah.
As I said, the guts of $500,000 being spent on fuel for getting that extensive fleet
Yeah.
around the place, and that's not actually counting the fuel for the ribs, which is a separate cost. And very significant amount of money being either spent on car hire or on the maintenance and the upgrade of the fleet. What steps are IFI taking in terms of electrification of fleet?
Can
Have we a significant component of electrical EVs now moving in?
We do. Can I just want, so 22.5% of our fleet are electric, so we have 46 vehicles. Just to go back to say one thing, Deputy, just to remember that in 2021 we were still in the height of the pandemic, and with regard to vehicle occupancy, rules kept changing, and our staff were deemed to be essential workers. So we were doing everything we possibly could to make sure that our staff were out on the ground carrying out their job and doing it safely. So at certain points in the pandemic, we could actually only have one staff member in a car when normally we would have 4 or even sometimes 5. At other times we had screens in the car where we could have 2 people in the car, one in the front, a screen and one in the back. So I suppose what I'd say is that in 2021, for example, we had, I think it was 102 lease cars. The following year, we had 38. You know, so it's an unusual year, is what I'd say. I just want to say that, but I'll get back to your question now with regards to the electric
Do you want
vehicles.
to give a reply to that regarding the electric?
Sorry?
Did you want to finish that?
Yes, I did. Yes, sorry,
Finish that,
apologies.
please.
Yeah. So, 46 of our 46 cars in our fleet, so that's 22.5%, are EVs, and they've travelled over 665,000 kilometres during the course of the duty since 2019. We recognise that 70% of our emissions are attributed to our fleet, but we're very proud to say that we have made a 44.5% improvement in energy efficiency when compared to our baselines, which is an SEAI performance energy indicator. So we're a leader with regards to energy performance, and we're very proud of that fact.
Thank you. Deputy Colin Burke, 10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. Can I just ask, just following up on the vehicle issue, this issue about the uninsured vehicles, there were 16 uninsured vehicles.
Yeah.
Surely vehicles would have an indication that they are insured on their windscreen, and the other issue was about tax.
Yeah.
I mean, how did that many? I could understand, it shouldn't happen, but 1 or 2, but this was 16.
Yeah.
It was a substantial number of vehicles.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, why? Surely there's checks and balances there, making sure that all vehicles are insured at all times.
There is now. So what I would say to you is that every year when we get our insurance policy, we obviously shop around to get best value for the public purse. In that year, we went with a company called LeasePlan. Part of the arrangements or part of the requirements was to contact them when any car went onto fleet. So obviously if it's a car on our fleet that doesn't come up, our permanent cars, they're on at the beginning of the year, they don't change, right? Unless we buy new vehicles. That year in 2021, as I said, we had 103 lease cars. Now, that doesn't mean they're not all brought on at the same time and taken off at the same time. That's 2 cars for 2
Isn't that a
weeks, 5 cars
complicated
for
way
another
of
week.
dealing with it? Say, for instance, if a member of your staff suddenly needs a car at 6 o'clock in the evening,
Yeah.
how then do you cover insurance?
So sorry, give me that question again.
If someone suddenly requires a vehicle at 6 o'clock in the evening, their existing vehicle
Yeah.
isn't functioning and they need to follow up something urgently,
Yeah.
and are you saying to me that if they suddenly get a vehicle at 6 o'clock in the evening, they're not covered by insurance?
No.
Because you won't be able to get onto the insurance company there and then.
Yeah. No. Usually if somebody, we have a 24-hour requirement to get a vehicle. So if you knew you needed a vehicle for tomorrow, you'd contact our field services team, and they would organise a vehicle. The first being to try and see if there's a vehicle.
If there was an
owned by
urgency
outside
arose,
Yeah, if an
say-
urgency, if the short term,
But surely the policy needs to be looked at from the point of view of that there's a cover there without necessarily having to identify the
That's in
vehicle.
place now.
That's in
That's
place
in
now.
place now,
And
yeah.
that was not the case
That
before.
wasn't the place at the time.
Just in relation to the issue then, there was money spent trying to make the insurance retrospective. I mean, surely that money spent was, my understanding, you engaged a firm of solicitors to deal with that. And there was a cost incurred when, you can't make insurance retrospective.
Yeah. No, I don't believe that was the case.
But he did engage a firm of solicitors.
Yeah, I suppose what I would say to you is that when we obviously didn't know that these vehicles were uninsured, how we became aware of it is when the accident happened.
But if
we
an accident
notified the
didn't
insured.
happen, if an accident didn't happen,
Yeah.
you could still have those 16 vehicles going around uninsured.
For the period of time that they were on a short-term lease, for the period, you're absolutely right. We wouldn't have known.
And you're satisfied that you've enough checks and balances there now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to say to you that now vehicles must the arrangement we have with the vehicle with the insurer, with AXA, is that the notification period, right, isn't immediate, and all our cars are registered on the national vehicle database. So so this situation can't happen. the lease plan insurance
just-
policy, you needed to tell the insurer before the car was driven that it was on the policy. The current policy doesn't require that notification.
And just in respect of insurance for premises, for boats, all the rest of it, are you satisfied now that you have adequate procedures in place to make sure that a slip-up like this does not arise again?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, there's two things. One, we put in a fleet manager who is solely responsible for boats, cars and trailers, and also the insurance, and he also has 2 staff working with him.
And are you satisfied that you've adequate insurance for buildings that you own as regards
Yes.
public liability? And remember, insurance is any one event, so if you have 10 people injured in one accident, then the limit is for the 10 people rather than 10 individual claims.
Yeah. No, as I said, we absolutely apologise for what happened, but.
But I'm specific about insurance,
what I'm saying is that
about limit of liability.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied that you have
Absolutely.
adequate cover in relation to limit of liability?
Yes.
Okay. Can I move on to a totally different issue, and that's in relation to legal costs incurred and the process for engaging. You know, obviously in prosecutions you have to engage with people. Are you satisfied that you have adequate procedures there as regards getting value for money in relation to legal costs?
Yes, Deputy. We do a legal tender through e-tenders. We have appointed 15 different solicitors as our solicitors in the 2021 accounts. I suppose they give us the best rates available, and they are based throughout the country to deal with the different prosecution matters that come up in the different regions. As well as that, we have some, I suppose, Dublin-based solicitors as well that deal with more corporate.
Okay. And can I just ask you in relation to, there's a judicial review case that you've taken.
That's correct.
I mean, are you satisfied, was this a board decision to take that judicial review? And, you know, what stage is that judicial review at now? And what is the likely cost to the Fisheries Board for that judicial review?
Deputy, at this moment in time, I'm just conscious that I'll answer your second part of your question afterwards. Obviously, the case has been heard. It's been written up by the judge at the moment. So, and we had full support of the board to undertake that process.
But the start of it was actually, it was a board decision.
It was a board decision.
Okay, because the reason I'm asking this question about this one is I've been involved or have seen a scenario where the Fisheries Board objected to a planning commission for a school. Okay. And took it all the way to Board, even though the school gave a commitment to the Fisheries Board. And I reckon that that delay has cost $2 million to the project. Is there a policy in relation to engaging on environmental issues with issues like schools, like local authorities, where there's a concern about the Fisheries Board?
I would respond to that by saying, Deputy, I think we would always try and find a solution in terms.
But in this case, there wasn't, because the issue basically was the sewage treatment facility in a small local community. The Fisheries Board felt it wasn't adequate for the school. The school was already connected. The old school was already connected to the system. And the school gave an undertaking that they would not increase the number of pupils. Yet the Fisheries Board took it all the way to Board and delayed the project for over 18 months.
Okay.
And I'm saying to you, is there a policy within the Fisheries Board about dealing with issues like that?
I mean, our policy would be to be pragmatic at all times and to try and find a solution. But the particular case that you're talking about, I'm not familiar with it. I haven't seen the file on it. So it's difficult for me to speak to that. I don't know if there's anybody.
I'm asking you, is there a policy? Because in this case, it went all the way to Board at a cost to the Department of Education and to the local community.
On these particular issues, there would not be a written policy.
Isn't it about time that there is a written policy? Because this is, and I fully understand the Fisheries Board. I fully understand the Fisheries Board wanting to protect the environment, and I fully understand that. But what I'm saying to you in this case, there wasn't engagement, and even where the school authorities tried to have that engagement, it was a closed door.
What I would say is we have a stakeholder policy, and I mean, I believe, as a senior person in the executive, as my colleagues do, that we would always engage. And like any public service organisation, you may have a policy around an issue. you may have a statutory remit, but you often have obviously discussions with other agencies around trying to find solutions, because nobody, our organisation, nobody wants to see a public service organisation not working in close cooperation with another. So I'm more than prepared to look at this and to speak to you about this afterwards. I'm just not familiar with it, Deputy.
And can I just ask, in relation to coordination between local authorities and the Fisheries Board, are you satisfied that there's enough processes in place so that there's a maximum benefit from your point of view and the delivery of the service that you're trying to provide? Are you satisfied that there is adequate processes in place for that engagement to be ongoing?
We engage, Deputy, at the highest level with county councils, city councils, on a whole range of issues. We would also, I mean, Law Pro obviously are part of the, I suppose, the county council system, and we would engage with them on a regular basis around water quality issues, catchment issues, habitat restoration. So the answer would be yes.
Okay. And can I just ask you, you're talking about staff, and I fully understand you've a lot of territory to cover, and in relation to environmental issues, do you feel that at this stage it would be helpful if you had additional staff to help out in that particular area? In relation to, because the Fisheries Board is obviously watching developments all of the time, because they're obviously, because the way you've already explained how stocking fish stocks have decreased substantially, therefore you would be watching future developments. Are you satisfied that you have sufficient staff to deal with that issue so that there can be that coordination between yourselves, local authorities, and development projects?
I think we're understaffed, Deputy, in this area. I identified that when I came back to IFI a number of years ago. What we're finding now is that our environmental officers in particular are basically, I suppose for the want of a better word, becoming locked into the office, reviewing planning applications all of the time and reviewing environmental assessments. And in the past, they would have spent more time in the field, they would have detected more issues, they would have taken remedial action in relation to more issues and more prosecutions if it was necessary to do that. But we find that, I think I said it in my opening statement, Deputy, the ecological world that we're in, it's changing all the time, it's getting very complex. And we find that our specialists now are reviewing applications from other agencies, from private companies, and it's bogging us down. And I suppose that is why myself and Roisin Bradley, my colleagues here in the SMT, did work on that business case. We have identified that as a weakness in the organisation. So thank you.
Deputy Cormac Devlin.
Thank you, Cairlock, and thank you, Mr. O'Donnell, and your colleagues for your opening statement. I suppose, like my colleague, Deputy O'Cossig, I just would prefer to have talked about the fish today. I think your corporate strategy, I think you signed off in 2020. I think you began as Chief Exec in 2020.
In 2020, that's correct.
So, there's a number of challenges that you've highlighted in your own remarks, and we should really be discussing those and indeed the accounts for 2021, but obviously there are other more pressing issues. In terms of the resignations, so there were 6 resignations from the board over the last little while, including the chairperson, and then there was a number of disclosures. Is there an issue at the board, between the board and the executive of IFI?
Well, I suppose just to respond to that firstly, it's publicly known that a number of board members did resign from the board.
A high number?
Yeah, I wouldn't have got sight of the resignation letters. They would have been directly to the Minister himself, Minister Eamon Ryan. I think with any board and any executive, there's a waxing and waning. I think that it should never get too comfortable. I think it's important that as an executive that we're challenged, but equally as an executive that we're not afraid to ask questions or raise issues or matters of concern. And I think that's a very healthy environment to be in. But I can only speak about my own relationship with board members in IFI. I felt I had a very professional and good working relationship with board members. They may not necessarily have the same opinion, but I can't speak to that. But that would be my view, Deputy.
And so the previous chairperson and then the new chairperson that was appointed who resigned a year later, you're saying you had a good working relationship with both?
I did have, yes.
Okay. I mean, to me, I think it's quite. It paints a different picture here for us. I mean, all this played out in the public domain, as you can appreciate. And you're right, everything went to the minister. And really, from the Oireachtas perspective, we heard that the minister was taking action in terms of IFI. But really, from what you're saying this morning, doesn't necessarily chime, and I think you can appreciate why, with what we are seeing. Because there's clearly a problem. There's a problem somewhere, and that will obviously come out in the wash. Can I ask Ms Bradley, as head of HR, then, in terms of the morale with the staff, how many staff do you have at present in IFI?
So just under 320.
320?
Well, depending on the time of year. Like at the moment, we have obviously our seasonal staff in, so that puts it up by another 50. So.
And overall in the organisation, what's the morale like?
I wouldn't say it's particularly good at the moment. I would say that staff are feeling very deflated.
And what are the main reasons, do you reckon, for that?
Sorry?
What are the main reasons, do you think, for that?
I think because of all the stuff that's played out in the public. Well, I want to say just very quickly that I'm working in the organisation 5 years. It's my first time working in the public sector, and our staff are one of the most amazing groups of people I've ever worked with. Their vocation to what they do is unbelievable, and it's palpable. I mean, it really is. They go above and beyond every day. And I think what they found so difficult was that all of this stuff was playing out in the media, and yet they were saying, well, like, what about us? What about all the... It kind of puts a tarnish on the jobs that they do. And I think that's been very difficult.
So what actions have you taken, I suppose, as HR and indeed the wider organisation to try and arrest that problem and try and motivate staff, I suppose, to as the good work that they do?
Well, we put together a wellbeing team. We actually got we got commitment from both the board and the executive to go for the Keep Well mark, so that we would have some kind of, I suppose, benchmark. Yeah, exactly.
And when did that start?
So we started that in late 2021, and we got the award in 2022.
Okay.
And then we're actually rolling out an employee survey through an external body in September.
Okay. And can I ask the CNAG, just following on from his opening statements this morning, in terms of the 2021 accounts, when did the audit begin for the 2021?
In 22. Yeah, around this time in 22. I can get the exact dates for you. Okay,
and then in terms of, I suppose, going to the issue from what Mr O'Donnell had said in terms of when the issue was flagged about the change of the base for his workplace, when did that become apparent during the audit, roughly?
Again, I'd have to check that. I know that the file came to me in December of 2022. Mm-hmm. There obviously had been a lot of issues surfaced. Each of the issues took some time. So it was in December, I think around the 12th of December, that I cleared the issues. But I think they would have been raised prior to that with staff members in IFI.
Thank you. And Mr O'Donnell, then, in terms of your decision to change back to Dublin, when did that take place?
Well, I got into negotiations straight away with the two Section 18 appointees, our two board members. Once was pointed out by the CNAG.
Do you have an idea roughly when that came to you?
I certainly took a mental decision 6 or 8 weeks ago to do that. But I wrote to the two board members officially probably a fortnight ago to say that my base had changed.
So it was just very recent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Deputy, can I just say, and it's important for me to say this here today, it was done for very genuine reasons, but I had no issue when it was pointed out by the CNAG. And I believe that if I had gone to a full board decision at the time, that there would have been no issue with that. And I regret that I didn't do that.
But there are no notes, though, is that right?
Well, there's a letter from the head of HR, Roisin Bradley, to the HR department, and I'm just going to read this letter, if that's okay. Dear Mr O'Donnell, I can confirm that your normal place of work, as specified in your 5-year fixed-term contract as Chief Executive Officer, is changing from the City West Business Campus to the Ballyshannon office, effective immediately.
And what date is that letter, Mr.
That letter is the 3rd November 21. The arrangement is made in line with section 2.2 and 2.3 of your contract. See page 2 of your fixed-term contract dated the 2nd of the 11th 20. All other terms and conditions of your employment remain unchanged. If you have any queries in relation to the content of this letter, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. So it wasn't something that just happened. There was a discussion between the chairman, myself, and head of HR, and that was the letter that I got.
Now, was that the original chairman? Was that the original chairman of the
Yes,
board?
it was the original chairman, and I appreciate that there's no other written record on this issue.
Okay. So in terms of just the timeline there, you know, there was very little written evidence of it, I think was the phrase. We found no contemporaneous written record of the proposed for work location change or its financial implications, or a decision in that regard by the board, which is responsible for setting the terms and conditions of the chief executive. That's quoting the CNAG's opening statement. And if the audit started and it was notified around December to the CNAG in December 2022, your letter that you've read out is the 3rd of November 2021.
Yes, that's correct.
And so, to me, you know, I think one letter, fine, and I think Miss Campion has said the cost was 5,400. Is that overall? I think it's probably in the round, irrespective of the amount of money and the way in which it was done. I think couple that with the issues around the fleet management or lack of management of the fleet. And other issues that we're discussing today, I think it points to either a laissez-faire approach within the organisation to items, or indeed, you know, something more sinister than that. And I think from our perspective as a Public Accounts Committee, you can appreciate why we would be very interested in various items that have arisen, not only at board level, but indeed the management of various items within the organisation. And I suppose from where I'm sitting, I think the overall management of the organisation, which ultimately stops with yourself as chief executive, you know, there's a litany of issues here. And as I said at the outset, we'd prefer to discuss the challenges that the organisation faces externally rather than internally. But there's quite a few internal issues that we're discussing today. Would you agree?
Well, I wouldn't agree with some of your comments, I'd have to say. I don't think we take a laissez-faire attitude to anything in IFI, and I have brought a significant number of governance issues to the attention of the board since I became CEO in 2020. There was nothing sinister about my base change. I have to say that word sinister, it's like a predetermined that I went about this in some kind of a sneaky way. I did not do that. I've said it, and I'll state it again for the record. This was agreed with the chairman at the time and the head of HR. The CNAG are correct. It should have gone to a full board decision. But if it was a sinister thing, I would have just done this myself and not asked for permission to do this. And my expenses were paid thereafter and signed off by the then chair. So I think it's important for the public watching this here today. It's not a laissez-faire attitude we have. We do have problems. We've apologised. We're absolutely upfront about them, and we need to get through this bottleneck. We have 2 excellent board members working along with us at the moment, significant, you know, great experience, and they're going to do their governance review that's going to help us. And public service organisations make mistakes, humans make mistakes, and we're here to answer for them. We have no issue. But just the word sinister, I have to object to that.
Deputy John Brady.
Thanks for looking. I'd like to welcome our guests here this afternoon or this morning. I just want to ask the question just in relation to Mr. O'Donnell. And when you describe that you had a good working relationship with the board members, would that be accurate? Yeah. And can I ask then, in terms of what is being portrayed publicly, that there was open civil war between the executive and the board? Would you agree there was civil war?
I don't believe that there was civil war at all, and I think that the media presented it in a particular way. And I suppose we're all here. We all know that people have various strategies.
Media portrayed it a certain way. I mean,
Yeah.
five board members resigned. They didn't resign because they thought there was a great relationship between the executive and the board.
I can't speak to that because I'm not actually sure why those board members resigned. They would have resigned directly to Minister Eamon Ryan. I would not have cited that.
Okay.
So I can't speak to that
Can I
point.
ask Mr. Marder, just in relation to it, and I'm not going to ask you to get into the detail of any content in resignation letters, but those resignation letters would have been received by the Minister and the Department. I'll be right in saying that, would it?
Yes.
Yes,
Some
yeah.
didn't give a reason. Some related to pressure of work, but I think our Secretary General wrote to this committee a little while ago in relation to correspondence received from the committee in terms of clarification, and quite clearly says in relation to the resignations that there was a breakdown in relationships. That means inter-board relationships. Okay, so that's important to emphasise that. That the executive, I think, follows the direction of the board, but if the board's not indeed that's a problem. But this is in a letter to the committee chair and deputy. But I take any other questions.
Can I just ask in terms of the minister's move to remove the 3 remaining board members, on what basis was that done, or why? I mean, we're being told there was no basis, it was on a no-fault basis. Why were those removed, Mr. Martin?
Well, again, it's contained in that letter to the committee, but there are functions reserved to the board, very important functions, in terms of strategy, in terms of finance, in terms of signing off on certain levels of procurement, all of that. We exercise corporate governance over IFI, not in the day-to-day operational sense, but on the bigger issues. If there's a board decision that requires further, for instance, the sanction of Dept to carry out the action, I would be charged with going to see that, going to secure that. And also, our governance relates to the code of practice for the governance of state bodies and compliance with the Act of 2010. Those are important things. But there are a number of functions which are listed in the Secretary General's letter which just couldn't be progressed. And if they weren't progressed, it would be very detrimental to IFI.
Okay, thank you. Just in relation to protected disclosures, can I ask how many protected disclosures have been made to the Minister?
I'm sorry, Deputy, I'm not privy to that because there's a specialised unit in the department. It wouldn't be appropriate for me as the head of Inland Fisheries Division to have any impact in there. But again, it's detailed in written correspondence of the committee that the disclosures remain at various points of completion. I'm sure that once they're completed, within the terms of the 2014 Act and obviously our own policies, and those disclosures made to IFI within their own, if matters can be forwarded to committee, we're happy to do that.
Just ask the question around dormant accounts, and there was an allocation of 30,000 that was refunded back to dormant accounts due to governance issues with the grant process. So can I ask, did IFA review all grant applications as a result of the disclosure, or only a sample? So what process on foot of the governance issues that were highlighted in terms of that 30,000 that had to be refunded? Mr. O'Donnell.
Yeah, that's really definitely. I suppose the review that you're talking about, which recommended the refund or a proportion of the 30,000 be refunded, that if I might think about that, looked at grants to the amount of 924,000 to IFI. IFI were absolutely privileged to have dormant account funding to work with, and we're absolutely regret that there's any queries around it at all. However, as it stands, that review looked at all the money that was given to us. It included the various different programmes and measures that were there in those 2 years, so 2019 and 2020. In effect, that, I suppose, 924,000 is about 75–78% of the total amount of grants that were given down to us. So the bit that wasn't looked at was the following year. In relation to the breakdown of that funding, so it was Go Fishing, it was Angling for All grants, and Novice Angler Activation. It looked at all amounts of money over 5,000 that were dispersed to third parties. It found these particular payments. IFI had a rationale for actually including them in it, and I suppose if you look at what they're about, Leave No Trace is about, you know, people in the environment. That's what the programme was about. It was about bringing people into the environment and to ensure that they wouldn't leave any trace after them. The visitor safety in the countryside, again, was looking at keeping all those people that we were intending to bring out safe in the countryside. So we were dealing with, you know, the Daft target groups, disadvantaged, educationally disadvantaged, and people with a disability.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Campion. I'm just conscious of the time here.
Oh, sorry.
Apologies. I just want to move on. Just in relation to Ashley Lodge, I think, am I right in the pronunciation of that? And just that particular property was leased to a staff member on an informal basis. I'm right in saying that. It has been disclosed that it was being operated as a guest house. I'm right in saying that.
I'll take that, Deputy. No, well, I suppose, can I go back a little bit, and I'll try and answer all of your questions. I suppose in 2000...
Well, maybe just a yes or a no on those points first.
Well, I don't think it was informal. There was a contractual arrangement in place with the employee, but the mistake started in 2017. I want to get to the nub of the issue here. The then regional...
Mr. Mistake started when?
In 2017. What I'm saying here is that at that point there was an internal call in IFI, obviously a tendering process to see if anybody internally was interested in leasing the property. That should never have happened. That was a mistake, and I think it was sort of a cascading effect thereafter, because the property was for sale. It was going to be very, very, very difficult to get anybody to actually tender to lease the property, because there was a condition there where you had to vacate the property within 10 working weeks if IFI actually managed to sell the property. But it was a mistake. It was a governance mistake, and we regret that happened. In 2021, when I reviewed the files and went back through some documentation, I realised that it hadn't been done on a national capacity, the tendering process, and I immediately brought it to the board's attention.
Okay, so how many properties similar to that would IFI have?
No, we would. No, we have two. I think just so that there's clarity around this issue, Ashley Lodge has 2 properties, 3 properties actually. There's 2 self-catering cottages, Deputy. There's actually a working base on the property, and then there's there's Ashley Lodge itself, the house that was given to the state by the Brayburns in 1984 after the murder of Lord Mountbatten.
Okay, so just I'm conscious of the time. I just want to move on to the fraud investigation that you alluded to by the Gardaí. And look, I'm very conscious that it is a live investigation. So without identifying any individuals, would you be in a position to provide some context around the various issues that the fraud or alleged fraud relates to?
Deputy and Chair, I'm just conscious that
I'd ask you to be cautious, but be brief.
Anything I say here, could identify somebody. We've known about it since 2022, or I was of the opinion that it had occurred from reviewing internal paperwork, and I suppose looking at timesheets and rosters associated with certain staff. And having looked at it very, very carefully, I was quite sure that something very significant had happened
You
over
only
5.
reported the incidents
Sorry?
to the Gardaí after a second review was carried out in September 2022.
I reported the matter first to the Gardaí in July, and I went back and I made a 25-page statement in September.
Okay.
That's as much as Chair. I
Thank you.
I have to be very careful here.
And I want you to be cautious from
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
If there's
Thank you,
investigation
Deputy.
ongoing. Okay, so just say to people, just say to members as well, be careful with language around words like sinister. It does have certain connotations. We're going to take Deputy Verona Murphy, and then we'll break for 10 minutes. Okay, Deputy Verona.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to start with Ms Bradley. In relation to the 16 uninsured vehicles, which is actually to have a vehicle on the road, Ms Bradley, it's a criminal offence to have it on it without insurance. Was there any prosecution in that regard?
No.
Was
Against inland fisheries, is it?
Yeah.
No,
So there was no prosecution brought for having a vehicle uninsured
no,
on the public highway?
no.
That's strange. Were you asked to present documents?
No.
Okay, was there a Garda involved? Were the Gardaí called?
So obviously how we became aware that the vehicles were uninsured was when the accident occurred. And obviously we contacted our insurance company, right? But the Gardaí haven't.
And how long ago did the incident take place?
It happened in August 2021.
So past the time for issuing any prosecution. You are aware that somebody in the organisation would be held responsible from a criminal perspective?
No, we do. I mean, we are.
So what have you
so
done
sorry.
apart from employing a fleet manager?
Yeah.
Has there been training in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a full review was done both in terms of the administration resources that needed to be done, but apart from that, we also made sure that we put in a fail-safe so that this cannot happen again. The
Okay,
insurance
so just
policy
to
that
be
we have in
clear,
place-
there was nobody in IFI made a statement on Garda Síochána with regards to no insurance matter?
We weren't asked to, no.
Okay, that's fine. And just to go back then to the maintenance, like it is quite, I wouldn't equate a logistics manager with a fleet manager ever, but however, seen as the same person seemed to be doing two jobs. I note in some of our reports that the idea of the telematics was that you would incorporate fuel and other services from them. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically the idea was that we had, it was like a dual relationship with lease.
So you bought a package?
Yeah, we had a
Right.
maintenance and insurance with them.
And it does say vehicle fuel. So do telematics provide you with
No.
fuel cards?
No, so we have our fuel cards through Circle K.
Circle K.
Yeah.
And so how many fuel cards do you have?
Oh, God, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Would
Maybe
each
it's-
vehicle have a fuel
Oh,
card?
yeah, absolutely. But,
Okay.
but we would also have fuel cards for boats and for certain equipment that would require diesel to operate them.
Okay, and so would the chief executive, for instance, have a fuel card?
I would have a fuel card.
You'd have a fuel card and the chief executive? Okay. How long has the chief executive a fuel card?
Well, I don't know actually if he has a fuel card. I have one.
He's nodding,
Check
so I
with him.
presume that's a
Yeah.
yes, Mr. O'Donnell.
So, I have a fuel card, and I think since about 2019 or early 2020, when I started first within Land Fisheries Ireland as regional director. And just for clarity, I use my car for work purposes only. I don't use it for any private use. We have a policy internally that prohibits
Sorry,
that.
you use your card or car?
No, sorry, I use my car, and obviously the card for
IFI
work
vehicle.
purposes only, for operational reasons for
So just a
IFI.
sec now, I just slow down for one
Oh,
second.
sorry,
Getting
okay.
ahead of me. So the car you have, is it a personal car or is it an IFI vehicle?
It's an IFI vehicle,
Okay, for which you have a fuel card.
which I have a fuel card, yes.
Okay, so when you were claiming subsistence, did you ever use that fuel card? And can we have a record? You're saying that you have the card since 2020?
I have it since I started in IFI, yes.
And you didn't use it obviously when you were claiming subsistence, and we'll be able to get a record of that.
That's not how it works. I would just claim the normal.
Well, hold on, why would you claim existence if IFI,
No,
subsistence?
I don't claim travel. You just claim an overnight. They're two different components of,
Right.
of the TNS system.
So let's clear that up. So
Yeah.
your travel, you were claiming an overnight. You had no mileage.
You're correct.
You had no mileage claim.
I have never claimed mileage. I go in and I use my card for IFI business, and that's it. It goes directly centrally back then to our finance section.
But clearly, if you'd fill the IFI car with the fuel card.
Of course.
Yeah, and you don't use that outside the business.
Of course I don't.
Perfect. So and moving back to that then, can we, you obviously have huge oversight of the fact that Mr. O'Donnell would have a vehicle but that he uses for work only.
Yes.
So how do you have telematics information then? You do?
We have
That's fine,
telematics,
yeah. So just then, Mr. O'Donnell, to go back to, from the information we received was that there was no record. I know you've subsequently read out a HR letter, but that letter came after the fact from our investigation or the CNAG's investigation. Was that letter posted to you, emailed to you? How did you receive? Where did you find that? That it hadn't been submitted initially?
Well, I don't know whether I got it in the post or I got it by email. I couldn't honestly answer that question. But I think it was sent by my colleague, Russian Bradley, and she might be able to
Okay, Ms. Bradley.
Can I just, I just want to explain how this came about, because I think it's going to be slightly...
No, I really just need to know
Okay.
when the letter, where
Okay.
the letter was that the CNAG hadn't received it.
Okay, so the letter was, as far as I remember, but I'd have to double check, I printed out a hard copy of it so I could put it in his file and left it on his desk, and I also scanned a copy of it to him, and I was obviously CC'd by the chairman, but that wasn't after the fact, it was at the
It
time.
was after the fact of our report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I take it, sorry, I'll just clarify that with the CNAG.
No, the letter that we're talking about was the 3rd of November 2021.
One.
That was a notification to the chief executive that his base had changed. So that happened at the time that the change was made. A year later, we were carrying out the audit and we were looking for where is the business case underpinning it. And the only document that was available to us for audit purposes was the notification to the chief executive that his base had been changed.
Which really wouldn't suffice from the point of view.
It wasn't sufficient, in my view, when the change of base should have been a decision of the board.
The board,
and I was looking for evidence of the board's decision in relation to the change of base in 2021.
And now, so that's been explained. Can you explain to me, in the absence of a board making that decision, why did you go ahead and then revert and repay the subsistence?
Because as a public servant, if the CNAG points something out to you, and they're of the view, a strong view, that the process around my change of base wasn't correct, that it should have gone to a full board decision, then I'm duty bound to lead properly and not be one bit afraid to do this and to say, okay, if I had known that I had to do that at the time, I would have gone to the full board and got a decision to do it, okay?
Now, Mr. O'Donnell, a man of your experience, you're telling me that you needed the just to be clear, you needed the CNAG to advise that it wasn't proper practice,
Well,
in line with public service guidelines, that you would just change your address.
can I respond to that? The chairperson of the board
But there must be a code of conduct.
and the head of HR agreed to this change.
Well, the chair of the board, when you say the chair of the board agreed to it,
Yes.
where have we seen that?
But that is correct, and the CNAG have pointed that out.
Who was the chair of the board at the time?
Well, Fintan Gorman was the chair of the board
And
at the
you're
time.
saying here categorically under oath that he agreed to your change of work.
Not alone did he.
You did, you just said
yes,
he
not alone.
accepted it.
Not alone did he agree it, Deputy. He signed off on my expenses, which would have been from the Ballyshannon base thereafter. So there
But
is
nothing in writing. There was nothing put in writing.
But there may have been nothing in writing, but he did agree to it. There's no possible way that I could have operated from the Ballyshannon base without at least getting agreement. And I had the letter from Deputy Bradley.
On that basis, I mean, would you not say to yourself, you didn't, why did you feel the need to pay back the subsistence if you were categoric in that you didn't do it unilaterally. You had Mr. The former chair.
Because the CNAG pointed it out. I sat down when the two Section 18 board members were appointed. They considered the issue. They were aligned with the CNAG on it.
Oh, I'm sure they were.
No, they were aligned with the CNAG on it. And I took the corrective action. Would you not have wanted me to do that?
Of course I would. I just wonder why it took so long and why it needed to be pointed out to someone in your position. Why that needed to be pointed out. I mean, these are basic rules in relation to public office.
I go back to 2021. It's about context here as well, Deputy. I mean, I was asking everybody in IFI at that point in time not to go to HQ, not to go to a regional office, work from home if you possibly could. That's really important. When your office is only open one day a week,
different times, I agree.
You know, and I think.
And just to go back, just one quick question.
Just very briefly.
Whilst that was one error, there was an accumulation of errors that makes IFI look like a basket case. For a start, the no insurance on the vehicles, something that I would find incredible, to be honest, as someone who has operated as a haulier for years. It is a jailable offence. The other thing is that the leasing of the cottage, you were aware of that?
Sure, I have just informed the other deputy.
I know, but you would take responsibility that there was a comedy of errors within IFI.
I think when over a time period, organisations make governance mistakes, right? And the difficulty with IFI was when these governance issues were brought, I suppose, to the attention of the minister and the public, they all came out at the one time.
But do you take any responsibility for that?
But why should I take responsibility? My responsibility at this point in time is to be here in front of this committee today.
As the CEO, I just asked, would you take any responsibility for all of those errors?
Well, I wasn't here for many of them, so I couldn't take responsibility for them. But I'm taking responsibility now to tighten up on governance and to get us through this bottleneck in the organisation. That is my job.
So you would be happy that there is nobody claiming travel subsistence within the organisation, but that would have the use of a fuel card categorically?
Well, absolutely should not be.
No, but you would have already stated that, obviously, to employees that shouldn't happen. Given your own brush with subsistence and repaying money, there would probably have been a sit down with everybody to say we need to have the height of good governance here and conduct.
We have a telematics system.
That only is.
No, it's very, very important, Deputy.
I don't want anyone confused about what a telematics system does.
But Chair, can I say?
Sorry, no, just stop for a second.
Yeah.
I'm chairing the meeting here. Okay. Just allow him to give an answer. We'll keep it brief.
Okay.
I want to allow Ms. Bradley has indicated 3 times she wishes to come in and come in briefly as well. Just clarify that point. Some clarification.
When a fuel card is used in IFI, we can there and then, or sometime thereafter, see whether that vehicle that the fuel card is assigned to was at that petrol station. And I do reviews, and I have done significant reviews on that in relation to an investigation that I'm assisting.
So you'd cross-check if there was any form of subsistence claim with fuel purchased, you cross-check that all the time?
I do cross-checks, and I have done cross-checks, but I don't want to go into that in depth now in relation to what I spoke about earlier.
Just briefly, Ms. Bradley, I know you were anxious to come in.
We've taken a lot of learnings from what's happened, and not only did we, as I said, put in a robust, new administration support system and the policy and all the rest of it, but we also conducted a number of mandatory sessions with staff to go to remind them of the fleet policy and the subsistence and more importantly about fuel cards and how they should be used and monitored and all that kind of stuff.
So you would be quite happy to state here categorically that there could be no cross between a claim for subsistence and use of the fuel cards. That's correct. Thank you, Chair.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to break for 10 minutes. And I'd ask people to be straight back in 10 minutes.
Chair, one small thing.
Just for a second, I think that very briefly.
Sorry, very briefly. No, it's just maybe for the record. It may not be that important. Unless I heard it wrong, I think the CNAG may have stated that the Inland Fisheries Ireland headquarters was in Donegal. It's actually in Dublin, but it's just for the transcript of the meeting. That's all. And I apologise if I misheard you.
And Mr. O'Donnell, can I just clarify from my own head? You have a sub-office in, you do have offices in,
We have
regional offices in
we have
Ballyshannon.
all around the country.
Yeah, just to familiarise myself with it, that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the one that you were using during
Exactly,
the COVID
Chair.
period, okay? Thanks for that clarification. So it's suspended for 10 minutes. Be back in here because we're starting in 10 minutes, right? If you're outside, you'll be left behind.
Okay.
Meeting suspended.
Okay.
Always good to top up the caffeine levels. Okay, we're back in public session. Committee is now resuming public session. So the first speaker back in is Deputy Alan Dillon. 10 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'd like to welcome our guests joining us this morning. You're very welcome. And I'll firstly say that you all know why you're here, because of the poor level of incompetence, the poor governance and the disregard to taxpayers' money. And that is evident within the accounts that were laid before the House, but also the statement on internal control, which took, I would say, at least nearly an hour, if not 2 hours, to read through. So you've apologised, and we accept that. But what we need now is further clarity and understanding around the revelations in these accounts and the actions and the decisions that were taken. And I'd also go as far as complimenting the board of IFI for disclosing their concerns within the standard of internal control, because that is the board's job, is to hold those in executive management level to account. And what happened to the board in relation to highlighting the issues was something that I'm sure the public will say that a lot of them resigned, a lot of them were disbanded on no-fault basis, and I think that is concerning, really concerning. And I think we have to, like in the instances of RTE, get the facts and get transparency out here in the Public Accounts Committee today. Can I ask Mr. O'Donnell, can he confirm if there's a separate Garda fraud investigation underway around a senior IFI appointment?
Is there a senior Garda investigation around? Not that
There is a separate Garda fraud investigation underway around.
I'm not aware of it, Deputy, if there is.
So there's only one Garda investigation underway at present. Can you confirm that today?
There's only one Garda investigation. That's correct.
Can I ask who requested the change of work base?
Actually, it was a discussion. I'm answering your question.
Can I ask the question again? Who requested? Was it you that requested the change of work base?
I can't actually answer that question.
Chair,
hold on.
It's a simple question.
It was a discussion, and I'd ask Russian Bradley to come in because I know that she's aware of how this happened.
Did Russian Bradley go to you and say that you should change your work base, or did you go to her?
Well, I let Russian Bradley answer that question.
I suggested it.
You suggested it.
Yes.
On what basis?
Because at the time, I suppose previously...
And your role, Ms. Bradley?
Head of HR.
So you requested that
Yeah.
the CEO,
Yeah. Let me just
who was in
explain to you.
executive management
Yeah.
level,
Yeah.
you requested him to change his work.
Well, I suggested it. I suggested it to the chair, first of all, to see if that was something that would be appropriate, and then I suggested it to the CEO. I should say to you at the time, the remote strategy, it's the remote working strategy for Ireland had come out, and I was rewriting policies.
I'm conscious
Yeah.
off the clock.
So just
Mr. O'Donnell had a contract in place.
Yes.
What was his work base within the contract?
The location was City West, but there was
Okay.
nothing preventing in the contract preventing me from changing it.
That's all I asked.
Yeah.
It was a signed contract.
That's correct.
It was legally binding.
Yes.
Okay. So you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. So Mr. O'Donnell has established that the chair and the head of HR agreed, okay,
Yeah.
agreed verbally in November 2021.
That's correct.
Okay. Are you aware if the chair has executive decision-making powers?
I genuinely believed that if the chairman said that we could do it, that I didn't realise that any other further requirement was necessary.
You're director of HR.
Yeah.
should you not have established that?
That's the reason why I checked with the chair, and if the chair said it was okay, I didn't believe, I figured I'm just telling you honestly, I believe that to be the case, that it was okay.
Yeah, and in terms of drawing up a new contract, I presume you drew up a new contract.
I drew up a letter with acts as an addendum to the contract, and I copied it by the chair.
Can we get a furnished copy of that contract? Do we have it?
This is the letter that they're talking about in November.
And can you present that to this committee?
Yeah.
Of course.
And who signed that contract?
So I signed it,
And who else?
just myself,
So you took the unilateral decision to change his work base
with the advice, well, with the consent of the chair, yes.
with the consent.
Yes.
But the chair had no executive powers in decision making. It had to go before the board.
Well, as I said, I wasn't aware of that fact, and
But-
the chair didn't advise me of that fact either.
Who didn't?
The chair.
But in terms of good corporate governance, proper legal contract arrangements, his original contract had stated that headquarters were in City West. So you took the decision.
I should say to you that I would take decisions like this during the normal course of work,
But
where
not
I
for,
would change other people's...
not for a chief executive.
Okay, I understand that, and now I know, but I can say to you that I believed that on the basis that I had the consent of the chair, and he is copied on that letter, I should say.
Mr. O'Donnell, you also sit on the board, is that correct?
I did sit on the board, yes.
Did you bring this to the board's attention?
I didn't bring it to the board's attention.
Why not?
Because, as I've stated, I think about 3 times already today.
But do you not think that that was a really important thing to bring to the board members' attention?
Can I answer the question? I didn't bring it to the attention of the board. The chair and the head of HR were aware of it.
But my question is,
if
why
I had thought at the time, Deputy, that I should have brought it to the attention of the entire board, I would have done that.
Do you not think that that is an important decision in the context of your contract? Did you try and conceal it from the board?
Well, I think, Deputy, the fact that the chair was aware of it.
This was
Deputy.
You're in the public accounts committee. I'm asking the question.
I am.
So this was a cosy arrangement between the HR director and the CEO. Because no one else was aware of it. Is that correct?
Can I say? It's not correct. It wasn't a cosy arrangement.
But you never brought it to the board.
The chairperson of the board, of any board, discusses and talks with their fellow colleagues on a regular basis. The fact that the chairman was aware of it.
When the chairman resigned.
As far as I'm concerned, at that point, it was okay.
Okay. Question. When the chairman resigned, when was the decision made? Was it after the chairman resigned or before the chairman resigned, when you actually signed that letter?
Well before.
Well before?
Yeah, like a year maybe beforehand.
A year before. Okay.
I wouldn't, sorry, just for the record, it was probably, if it's November 21, the chair resigned in late April 22.
Okay,
so just for the record, Chair.
So you never thought to bring that to the board's attention?
I didn't see any issue with it at the time. I keep stating that.
Do you think Paul Reid would have changed his work base as head of the HSE and said, well, I'm going to change my workplace to Leitrim, even though HSE's headquarters are in Dublin?
I'm not going to comment about what any other executive
because
does. I'm here to account for myself,
well, we're here
not for any other executive.
We're here
deputy.
to talk about governance. We're here to talk about protecting the taxpayer.
Yes.
The taxpayer was put on the tune for an additional €5,000 because of your HR's director, both of you, entering an arrangement which seems absolutely ridiculous in nature, and then to be caught on the basis of the Standard for Internal Control, the CNAG, and you're here to answer questions in relation to it.
There's nobody, Deputy, caught here. Everything that we do...
You reversed the decision. On what grounds?
Sure, I've already spoke to that.
On what grounds?
The CNAG pointed out they were clearly of the view that they should have gone to a full board decision. This is probably my 5th time saying that. The Section 18 appointees who have just joined IFI,
which only happened this year.
Can I finish?
Which only happened this year,
Mr. O'Donnell.
Either, Chair, I'm going to be allowed to answer a question, or I'm being badgered here. I think it's unfair.
If you're asking a question or making a charge, I do want to give the witness a chance.
It either has to be a question or a statement. I mean, I can't answer a statement. It's either a question, or if it's a statement, I can't answer that, Chair.
Please respond.
Could you repeat the question, please, Deputy?
You entered a contract on a unilateral basis with your HR director. Never got board consent. Do you think that's acceptable?
I think in the context of how it happened, why it happened, and when it happened, it was done in absolute good faith. I did it in good faith then, so...
you were the only beneficiary of this.
Well, actually, how is that the case?
Because the headquarters of IFI are in City West.
Okay,
that's where you should be based.
Then I would ask you the question, and if the office was only open 1 day a week...
you only changed. We were well out of COVID when you actually made that change.
We weren't well out of COVID, and our office was only open 1 day a week at the time.
When did you change your work base? What date?
I think it's November 21.
When did you change your work base back to City West?
I can supply the record to the meeting. I don't know exactly what date.
I'll ask the HR director.
No, just roughly, what at the time did you use Shannon? I don't ask. I know you can't remember.
Well, I've claimed no expenses for being in Dublin.
That's not the question I asked. When did you change back your work base?
Probably a fortnight ago. I officially wrote to the two Section 18 members. This is a discussion. This was part of a process.
Is that acceptable, Ms. Bradley? I have to say that there was a number of things. Do you not ask for him to, since it was your suggestion in the first place, when we entered out of COVID, that he should revert back to City West? Let me just say to you, it wasn't purely for COVID reasons that I came up with this suggestion. But you said previously it was related to COVID. When Mr. O'Donnell did. I said that wasn't my only consideration. I was looking at a number of things. So first of all, the remote working strategy was talking about redeploying people back into rural settings. That's the first thing. The second thing is there has always been a bit of a them and us in terms of Dublin versus the regions, and I've redeployed, like say my learning development manager job is advertised in Ballina and Limerick. In the past it would have been in Dublin. Mr. O'Donnell, thanks. Yeah. Mr. O'Donnell, have you claimed expenses in 2023? Mr. O'Donnell.
Sorry?
Have you claimed expenses in 2023?
Of course I've claimed expenses in 2023. I travel all over the country for IFI.
To go to your headquarters in City West, have you claimed expenses?
I have claimed expenses.
And overnights?
And overnights, which...
And do you think that's reasonable? Or justified?
I have paid back the expenses from the start date of the Section 18 members. I can't speak for them because they're not here today, but my conversation with them was, what happened under a previous board happened under a previous board. If the previous chairperson signed off on my expenses, they did. But from the 14th of February was their starting date. Anything that I had claimed after that period, I've paid it back. That's what I was asked to do, Deputy. That's what the board asked me to do. They are my employers, and I have done that. So, there's a full transparency here. It's not credible, Mr. O'Donnell. I'll be honest. You know what, not credible. Chair, the records are absolutely clear. It's not credible, and Ms. Bradley, it's not credible. And to say that it's not, you didn't seek this is change of HQ base until 2 weeks ago. Can I say something, Chair? I think we're being very credible today. We're being very open, and we're being very honest to the committee. And I just find that. This is about the 5th time we visited this, which is fine. It's the Deputy's right to question. This was done in very good faith. There is not a board member here today, Mr. O'Donnell. Where is your Chief Financial Officer? Your Chief Financial Officer. When have you taken over that role?
Since the 31st
We're going overtime. Since the 31st of?
March.
Okay, thank you. Deputy McAuliffe.
Yeah, look, thanks to the witnesses for being here today. And I just want to sort of put in context the questions that the members have asked to date. I think you have been very open in the way you have answered the questions. The difficulty is that some of the responses have elicited more questions, and it's only right that members of the committee have an opportunity to follow up on those questions. I think we should all just take a moment. Our job is to try and get to the bottom of that. I would say one thing though. There's lots of signposts here that there isn't a fully functioning relationship between the senior management team and the board in IFI, or there hasn't been, and that there are problems. And while €5,000 is not the be-all and end-all of the future of IFI, it does help sort of identify and illustrate the working relationships that were happening at the time. And I think that's why Deputy Dillon is very correct to try and focus on some of these issues. And I'm going to do it again. I suppose I find it really unusual how this arrangement began. And the reason I do is because hundreds of thousands of people right across Ireland changed their workplaces, carried out their work in different ways, in different manners. I can't think of any other scenario that I've heard of, even informally, and I'm on boards and so on, where a person's employment was changed. And so a change, and as a HR director, a change of employment means something. It carries an additional cost to the company. It's not about where you work, it's about your legal place of work for revenue and for purposes of travel and subsistence. So I'll go back to Mr. O'Donnell just to ask the question. Are you saying that you did not request this? This idea did not come from you. You did not speak to Ms. Bradley. You did not speak to the chairman. This was something that was put to you for the first time.
I think as the head of HR has alluded to, she suggested it to me first.
To be fair, Mr. O'Donnell, I'm asking you the question directly.
And I'm saying.
Don't use Ms. Bradley's words to answer your question.
That is my recollection. It was then a discussion, a normal discussion, and then it progressed and evolved into my change of base.
So when you said earlier to Deputy Devlin that you contested the word sinister, I accept your right to do that. Bear with me. But in replying to that, you said if this was sinister, I wouldn't have asked for it. So, did you ask for it, or did you not ask for it?
I didn't ask for it, okay. But I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have gone ahead with something as a senior public servant if I thought that I was genuinely doing something wrong, or the word sinister, or anything like that. There, I mean, it's my job.
So, Mr. I'm removing you then from the initial timeline of how it initiated. So, Ms. Bradley, what came across your desk? What made you consider possibly changing the contract of the CEO, his place of work?
Right. So a number of things. The first thing was the previous CEO lived in Dublin and spent a lot of time in Dublin. All of our kind of support services posts, so anything in HR, finance, communications, they were all based in Dublin, even up as far as an AP grade post, right? And so there had kind of been a bit of a view maybe in the regions that, you know, all the nice jobs are in Dublin, right? So when I first came in, one of the first things I did was actually started splitting my team and started recruiting for my team, who had all been based in Dublin, in the regions, right?
And was that a formal strategy, or was that just
no, that was a formal strategy. It was actually part of my HR strategy, actually.
So you had a formal strategy to implement more diversified locations.
Yeah.
Okay, when you made the change or proposed the change, you obviously realised that would have impact and cost for travel and subsistence.
I suppose what I would say to you is that he was spending most of his time in Galway, right? Anyway, so to be honest, I didn't see that there was really much of a difference, to be honest.
The difference was, and as a HR director, you'd notice, the difference is that your travel and subsistence is paid from your place of employment.
Absolutely, and to be honest, you
so
know
he could have worked in Timbuktu or Reykjavik or anywhere.
That,
the point is that changing the place of employment in the contract is a very specific thing.
Yeah.
What made you consider that?
I suppose I probably didn't give it the weight that it was due, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
And I have to say, in hindsight, I was only thinking about this recently. In hindsight, what I should have done was said, change your base, but we'll keep it that in terms of subsistence, it's your base or Dublin, like the way you'd have your base or home, you know, when you're claiming subsistence. It should have been your base, home, or...
So that follows on the question,
you know,
was anybody else's base changed?
So, well, I have changed people's bases.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But was anybody else's base changed as part of this policy at a senior level, or?
Well, up to, I mean...
for example, was your place of work changed?
No, it wasn't.
Employment, no.
No.
Was
no one else on the executive team. But as I said, we have done that in the past. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and it could be done for logical and organisational reasons. I think it comes to the core of that an additional cost was levied on the
Yeah.
organisation.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Donnell was travelling. He was being reimbursed for the travel that he did.
Yeah.
He didn't gain any money for that
Yeah.
subsistence. You can make a few bob on subsistence, but by and large, you'd
Not
want
in-
to be
not in Dublin.
You'd want to be working very hard.
Yeah.
My point is that Mr. O'Donnell did the work. He was reimbursed from a tax
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
But the issue here was that the company paid more money
Yeah.
when they already had a contractual arrangement with Mr. O'Donnell to not incur that cost.
Yeah, I understand that. As I said, in hindsight, I would make a different decision. I should say to you though, it genuinely was made with best intent. It was open. Everyone in my team knew about it. It wasn't a water cooler discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, so
it was a honest error is
Yeah.
the point you're making. Okay. I suppose the next thing then is the signing off of changing the contracts with the CEO, and I think it's an unusual position because the CEO has no line boss at an administrative
Yeah.
level within the company. I suppose would it be normal that you would go to the chair on different issues directly?
yeah.
Like what sort?
How do you mean?
Would you not? Normally the reporting relationship is between the CEO and the board.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is, well, yes, I suppose, because it's an unusual situation to be in my position, because say when the last CEO was exiting, I would have been the conduit actually between him and the board, you know, managing his exit, which was an odd scenario because he ultimately was the person I reported into. So it is a weird scenario. I understand that. Yeah.
But I suppose that there was a level of informality there in board governance that probably, if it had been communicated by Mr. O'Donnell to the chair, it probably would have normally went through a board meeting or entered into a board pack and so on. But because of that informal connection between you and the chair, again, I think that points to an informality of governance that might have happened for very legitimate, logical reasons, but it was an informality of governance there that doesn't rest with you, by the way. It does rest with Mr. O'Donnell. You know, staff members shouldn't be reporting directly to the board on any operational issues. I think the only time I ever, well, as a board member, the only time I ever speak to a staff member is if I have to sign a director's form, or, you know, I would never speak to the head of wages or the head of, for any of the boards I'm on. I just think that's, again, it shows the level of informality. So can I switch to the department, because I think you've got a bit off the hook here, but we've been talking about IFI for a long time. There's a senior council review here. There's a McCann Fitzgerald review. There's a Garda investigation. There's effectively no fully functioning boards. Can you just give us an update as to where we are in terms of a full board appointment, in terms of the McCann Fitzgerald report, and in terms of why, when the senior council's report came back and said that there was no reason for the directors to resign, the board members to resign, they were asked to resign.
Well, the senior council report, the Bradley report, was completed in July of 22, and we received it in the Minister's office a short time later. I don't think it's quite accurate to say that there was no reason for the board to resign. The report is quite clear. And taking paragraph 103 of that report and reading in isolation does not present the accurate or entire picture here. I have the exact sentence here. If you'll bear with me, please, Deputy.
Of course, yeah.
I won't.
You're saying that as you're looking for it, you're saying the senior council report gave the basis for the removal of the.
No, I'm not. I didn't say that. Not at all. Sorry, I know it's at 103. It's coming here. Now, 100, 102, 103. There is not a basis from the alleged disclosures and the information and documentation which has been reviewed for the Minister to be satisfied that the functions of IFI are not being performed in an effective manner such as to effect the removal of the board. Below that, there are a series of very important recommendations made by Mr. Bradley in relation to the conduct of the board's business, which clearly indicate that the delivery was suboptimal. It wasn't sufficiently suboptimal as to effect a removal at that stage. You must remember this arrived into the Minister in July of 22. The Minister took the decision to remove the board in February 14, 2023. In the meantime, the board, the Minister asked the senior officials, including myself in the area, to meet with the board. The board accepted the recommendations, all of the recommendations, including the one you cited in the report, and agreed to move forward working with the executive, implement all of the recommendations in the report, and report back to the Minister.
Okay. And can I ask, Mr. Martin,
yes.
the McCann, just because they were seeking documents, Chair, but the McCann Fitzgerald report, where is that at this point?
That's in relation to protected disclosure.
Yes.
As I've said earlier, it would not be appropriate for me as the head of the division, looking after the governance of IFI to be privy to that. So I don't even know what's in it. But
it's commissioned by the department.
Yes, and there is as I said earlier, there is already correspondence to the committee in that regard, and there are a number of disclosures
Well, Mr. Mayor, if you're not in a position to respond on behalf of the department here today, could you seek a written reply to that question from the department?
What I can say, Deputy, is that the process which is being carried out under the department's policy for protected disclosures, under the aegis of the special unit dealing with that, which is not accessible to others in the department, and under the 2014 Protected Disclosures Act, must run its course. I've already updated the committee in the sense that the various protected disclosure investigations are at various stages, and once completed, I did offer to come back, or to have the department come back.
It was a simple question, Mr. Mayor. Can we get a written update as to where things are?
As soon as due process has taken place, of course.
Thank you.
It's important that that takes place.
But the committee is asking where we are in the investigation. I think it's a legitimate question. We could be at the very beginning,
I'm
at the
not
end.
privy to that information. Where at various
Mr. Mayor, I'm not
stages.
asking you for it.
Okay.
I'm asking you to get an update from the department on it.
Absolutely no. But can I just,
that commitment's been given
can
by
I
the
just answer
official.
one further question and one further clarification? The Minister, as you know, removed the board on a no-fault basis on 14 February. One of the reasons for that is that the recommendations of the Bradley report were not implemented by the board. Okay, that's a simple issue that arose. And also, I don't think it's been characterised here that IFI is in some way borderless or directionless. That is not the case. Section 18 of the Act is very, very specific, that the appointees are carrying out the full functions of a board. There is no board per se. In other words, under the Act, there are 10 members of the board. One is ex officio, but there are nine persons appointed by the Minister.
Can I clarify, Mr. Mayor, just on that, the two former county managers, they have powers and functions equivalent to what the board would normally have.
Their function under Section 18, Chair, is to manage the affairs, the statutory obligation and affairs of IFI.
The full authority under Section 18.
Full authority.
Okay, thanks for that. Deputy Murphy.
You're very welcome. And in the last 7 days, we've had the horse regulatory body, we've had RTE, and we're having yourselves. And what we have had is a dysfunction overload in a week. I've got to say that is highly unusual in terms of the extent of it that we see at the Public Accounts Committee. You talked about the vocational nature and the opening statement of many of your staff, and I accept that, and I accept their morale must be on the floor, but it's not because of what's in the newspapers. All of this is self-inflicted damage. There would be not the adverse newspaper articles if there wasn't a basis for the adverse newspaper articles or media articles, whatever. And so I think your staff, rather than just ourselves or the public, require a very serious consideration of how you will make an apology to them, particularly people that are out working on fish kills and conservation issues. I think that's I think that's kind of self-evident. I want to start by asking you about the dormant account funding. You got 1.18 million, and that fund is really kind of confined. I mean, it's not everyone that would qualify for it. It's to go towards disadvantage and disability. And you obviously applied for this. And then there was subsequently 3 reports at the cost of 50,000, which is extraordinary. And there were governance issues identified. And I want to just kind of, because of very limited amount of time, and that's why we're trying to get a lot in a very short period of time. So I wanted some short replies. There was an internal audit. Was that part of those 3 reviews? And the internal audit found that there was no justification for spending, for example, for the ploughing championship at I think 8,500. And the no trace expenditure of 17,500. Can you confirm that that was a finding?
That's not correct, actually. They said a proportion could have been, that IFI should consider repaying a proportion of those amounts.
So you applied for this money, the expectation would be that the money would have almost all gone to, with the exception of a small amount of administration, would have gone to a direct a direct advantage to people with disadvantage and disability. And yet there was a lot of money spent on, for example, salaries, overnight subsistence, things like the ploughing championships.
Okay, so none of the Dormant Accounts money went to the Ploughing Championships, Leave No Trace, or Visitor Safety in the Countryside Group, because IFI bore that cost. In relation to what we do for Dormant Accounts, it's projects and programmes that would assist the socially and economically disadvantaged, educationally disadvantaged, and persons with a disability. That's the legislation. So IFI is happy that everything we did was on plans and programmes that would assist those particular categories. I can only say that we were so privileged to do it. We have been inundated with requests since we stopped doing it, and we're really, I suppose, regretful that it has stopped.
Yeah, and did you return money?
Basically, we drew down money in arrears, so it was a net off of what we were drawing down.
What was the amount that?
It was 29,740, something like that. Sorry, I don't know the exact amount.
Okay, somewhere in that order.
Yeah.
There were a small number. I just want to ask you one particular thing before I go back, and I want to ask you about some of the legal fees. But I want to also ask you, there was an internal review in July 22, and again one in September 22, and the CEO reported potential fraud to An Garda Síochána in 2022. But it appears that that report was only made after the second review. There was 2 reviews, so after the second review. Why was it not reported after the first review, if that was the case?
You're not talking about Dormant Accounts now?
No, I'm talking about the fraud investigation. The internal review in July 22 and September 22. There were 2 internal reviews.
Sorry, Deputy, now, internal reviews, can you be more specific, please?
I'm specifically talking about the fraud investigation.
Yes.
By An Garda Síochána.
Yes.
How many of those are there? Fraud investigations.
There's one.
Okay, so we're talking about the
one investigation.
But
sorry, but I first reported the issues to the Gardaí, along with a number of other issues, not just fraud, in July, and I went again back to Gardaí and Ballyshannon in September and made a far more detailed statement.
Okay, so they were fully, once you became aware of it, there was you reported it to the Gardaí.
Once I was satisfied myself that there were very significant issues here, yes, I did. And I'm being very careful here now because, Deputy, there's a very, and the committee can have me back again, there's a very clear reason around the timelines of my making my reports. And if I was to speak to them, I could jeopardise the case.
Can I'm not, and I don't need the further expansions once we've got to that. There's an extraordinary amount of money spent on legal fees. Now, I fully accept the organisation will be prosecuting people, but and people who are, you know, damaging the environment, and that's the nature of your job. But there seems to have been an escalation, about 3 times the amount that you would normally have spent on legal fees in the last few years. Why is that, and what is the nature? Apart from the ones that we would be around prosecutions, what are the other areas that the legal fees are being spent on? There's one particular firm, Byrne, Wallace, Cokery and Moriarty. I think they're based in both Dublin and New York. I mean, what would they be, for example?
Deputy Murphy, can I go back to your last question in relation to the repayment? We got 300,000 drawn down in June 2021, but we only spent 256,000. So we had to give back 43,817. Our figures were based on the fact that the drawdown originally...
I want to get to the other reply, please.
No problem. Yeah. Anyway, it was a net off against the drawdown. Yeah. So in terms of the legal fees, Byrne Wallace got 157,000 in 2021, 235,000 in 2022, and 201,000 so far in 2023.
I'm not asking you how much they got, because I know it's $1 million with when you amalgamate them all. So okay. I know, because I got a PKQ reply on that. What were the outside of prosecutions? What was the nature of the spend that has escalated the spend on legals?
Okay, in 2021, we had 235,000 for prosecutions. We had 90,659 for ALAB. That's the judicial review into the Aquaculture Licensing Authority Board, or I'm not sure what the A means. We had 39,000 in relation to dormant accounts funding.
You spent 39,000 on legals around the dormant accounts fund.
Yeah, 29,000 on a report, and a further 10,000 on legal advice. And then there was 25,000 for.
And is that 29,000 on the report included in that
the
50,000?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And 25,000 on various other, I won't call them bits and pieces, but like say HR advice, you know, different, say, conveyancing or whatever.
And was the HR advice in relation to the issues around the board?
No.
Right, so it was internal staff.
This was 2021, yeah.
Okay. Just I have a bunch of questions. Just as a matter of interest, I mean, obviously the minister will go looking for, you know, in terms of the budget, looking for additional funds. Are you, you know, put yourself in the minister's position in relation to all of the things that have been that have come to light, and you know, not insuring vehicles, you know, the dysfunction around the board, all of that, and ask yourself, you know, for an organisation that you say is understaffed, requires technical people, and all of that, do you honestly think that it is viable for the minister to actually go and seek additional funding in the context of the context of all that we're seeing in relation to this?
Can I take that question, Deputy? I think it certainly would be viable, and I say that in the context of.
Is it politically viable?
Well, I mean, we're here today to account for it. I think we've done that very honestly and very effectively. It doesn't change the mandate that we have, Deputy. We have a very significant environmental resource out there that we need to protect, we need to manage, we need to look after for current citizens and future citizens. So I think we're very well placed to do that. We're going to have a governance.
I've got to beg to differ.
Well, that's okay. But as the chief of the organisation, I have to stand up for IFI today and say that we're absolutely acceptant of the fact that we have governance issues. They're on the table now. We're discussing them. There's going to be a review undertaken by the board, and there'll be a new board in September. So, I mean, we're extremely cognizant of what has happened here. But it shouldn't mean that as a leader and as the executive team here, that we wouldn't, like, it is a vocation. I'm fully committed to expanding IFI.
Can I just say that I think the vocational side is certainly the people out, you know, with the wellies and, you know.
Well, can I say it's not that long since I had the wellies on myself, Deputy, so.
Just you want to come in, just keep it quite brief, yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
It helps the Deputy. I mean, legal costs, there have been a number of significant High Court challenges in recent years, which costs were mounted in relation to fishing rights owned by the state, and the expectation of the Department and from the Minister is that IFI would defend and vindicate those rights on behalf of citizens. And I think, I don't think there's any demurring from the fact that that's extremely important, where people are coming to try and usurp the rights vested in the state and various parts of the state. So that's added to, that's part of the legal issue, and as you know, the High Court can be quite expensive. Thankfully, we've secured and won the cases so far, and we will continue to vindicate the rights. That's done through IFI.
So
it's important.
Presumably it's the State Claims Agency that leads,
No.
So you do it directly?
We do it directly. Well, IFI do it directly with the support of the Chief State Solicitor's Office and obviously the Attorney General. And the other thing I want to say is that in relation to, you know, the Minister's asked for a workforce plan for IFI, particularly around the protection, conservation, development, extremely important. We're in the middle of a biodiversity crisis. It has been understaffed for some time. We secured a small amount of staff for this year, but there's a workforce plan, and critical to that is that the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, their plan in terms of the removal of barriers of fish passage, which is required under EU legislation, and they have asked IFI to deliver that, given their expertise over many, many years.
The removal of barriers?
Yes.
River barriers?
River barriers,
yeah,
yes.
Okay. And could I just ask you, and the board, the plan is to get a new board in place in September?
Well, I can update you very quickly on that. Yes. Obviously, the two very experienced Section 18 appointees acting in local board at the moment, well known, they will complete their governance review. That would be a template for the new board.
Along with the review, there's oversight from those two individuals as well.
Hugely important.
Okay. At the moment, just can you confirm that? There's oversight, okay.
Absolutely, second to none, I can say.
Yeah, that's all right.
And the other element of that is that the template for the new board coming in, and both competitions, the Oireachtas committee for the department nominates a number of persons for appointment. Minister does all the appointments, and then there are two other ministers who have an opportunity to nominate. But the three ministers, our own minister and those two ministers, have agreed to a common pass process. Those processes have been advertised, so we expect to have a new board in place once those competitions are finished. And PASS advises us that that's about 12 weeks from advertisement to having a panel in place.
Thank you. Could I just revert back to the Ashley Lodge? Oh, correct pronunciation, I hope. It's a Victorian country house.
That's correct.
Many rooms are in it.
There's 8 rooms en suite, Chair.
8 rooms en suite.
And
then a number of
2 reception rooms, a kitchen, and other facilities.
Area,
yes.
Yeah. And a hall for socialising in. A lot of those country houses had that.
Well, there isn't a hall. There's a small landing, but there isn't a hall. A small landing.
Okay. And there are 2 cottages.
That's correct,
also,
Chair.
Close to the house.
They're with probably about 200 metres from the house.
Okay. Many acres are on the site?
20 acres, Chair.
20 acre site, okay. So could I just ask in relation to this that when were there issues first flagged regarding Ashley Lodge?
Well,
just know,
going back some time, because the property had.
You came in 2020
in November 2020.
November. Did you hear about this straight away, fairly soon afterwards?
Not fairly soon afterwards.
Not fairly soon?
Not fairly soon afterwards,
Was it 2021 before you heard of it?
It was 2021 before I was aware of the leasing arrangements.
Right. You were aware of the existence of Ashley Lodge?
Of course I was.
Right, okay.
Chair.
So, were any of the witnesses that are here today aware of what was happening at the lodge or the cottages? Anyone here?
Yeah, I suppose, I was aware. I was involved in the last tender last year, in relation to Ashley Lodge for tenants to
Were you
look
aware
after
of
it.
any of the issues around the miscampion? Any of the significant issues around it?
No, I suppose what I was aware of since I took over the role was the issues that were happening in Ashley Lodge have been going on since IFI took it over, and before that, in relation to the board were the board were constantly concerned about Ashley Lodge,
Okay.
because I suppose it was operating at a loss.
Did anyone here from IFI ever visit the lodge?
Yes.
You did. Did you stay in the lodge?
No.
Anyone here ever stay in the lodge, holiday in the lodge?
Oh, sorry, I stayed in the lodge.
You
Sorry.
stayed in it for how
I stayed
long?
for a night for when in the Central Regional Fisheries Board's time for an NFME OMT meeting.
So it's in relation to a meeting. Was that meeting on site
Yes.
the next day or something like that, was
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah, well, it was
And Mr.
either
Gallagher,
Saturday.
you indicated you wish to reply to that briefly.
Yeah, I stayed there on one occasion. I remember attached to the lodge is the National Salmonid Index catchment. It's a research station. So I stayed and paid my fee and stayed at the lodge on one occasion. A number of years ago.
Okay.
Can't remember exactly when.
There was an arrangement then where there was it was leased to an outside operator, and there was 84,000 of a loss in the previous 4 years. When it was leased to an external operator, and they pulled out in 2017, as I understand. And then, then there was an employee and spouse. They were successful in becoming the leasee at that point in 2017, or sometime after that. Was it 2017 or 18?
17, Chair.
Yeah. Now, you may not want to name the person, but what position would they hold within the organisation?
They were holding an admin role within the organisation.
A senior admin role.
I can answer the question, but I might identify them.
Right.
I suppose somewhere in the middle, Chair.
Middle, okay. So middle management.
Not middle management, no.
Middle management.
No. On the administrative side,
Okay.
probably somewhere in the middle. Roshan could probably speak to that better.
It's an entry grade.
Okay.
Okay.
It's an entry grade.
Okay. Thank you for that. Why was it leased to an internal, somebody internal in the organisation?
Well, I'm going to put context around that, but I have stated, Chair, at an earlier discussion on this matter that it was a mistake and it shouldn't have happened. So I'm just going to repeat that for the record. From what I can gather, and I don't see, there is correspondence around this, the thought process was at the time that the property was for sale and it was going to be very, very difficult to get anybody to actually lease the property. One of the issues was that if you leased the property from IFI, and IFI were fortunate enough to sell the property, you would get 10 weeks notice to vacate the property. The difficulty with that is that if you had customers or clients booked to come on holidays and stay in the property, obviously there was a significant risk there for the leasee.
Was the two cottages being used as well by the...
No, it was at that point, Chair. It was
it
was only the cottages that were
only
being used.
the cottages. The mansion wasn't being used.
Wasn't being used.
Okay.
So it was just the cottages. I want to make that clear. So yes, it was an internal decision. The board were appraised of it in March 2017 that somebody internally may lease the property. There is a note to that fact in the file. I found that note.
Can I ask Mr. O'Donnell, who was responsible for putting that in place and who signed off on it?
It would have been signed off, I'm sure, at the time by I would imagine, Chair, in 2017, the former CEO.
Is there anybody here that was working in the organisation in 2017?
Yes, I was.
You were Ms. Campion. Would that be your understanding?
I would have thought it would have been the regional director at the time, but it could have been either.
And the regional director is no longer in place?
No.
Right, okay. And was there a business case or a feasibility case put forward for the use of the lodge at any point?
There has been recently, Chair.
Sure, okay.
I suppose the property couldn't be sold. We had the difficulties around leasing the property. I think just to explain to people that as you enter the property...
Sorry, just repeat that. The property couldn't be?
We couldn't get the properties.
Yes,
It was on the market. It was on the market for 3 years.
3 years from 2017.
Yeah. Well, I suppose when you think about it, I don't know what
There was
this
an
was.
asking price on it, wasn't there?
There was an asking
Yeah,
price,
by
and
the Galway company.
I don't believe that we reached that. The 2 cottages, in my view alone, are probably worth 500,000. The house probably another 400,000 or 500,000, and then 20 acres of land overlooking Killary Harbour, a very significant piece of real estate. Now it's in an SAC. I accept that.
Nice part of the country.
A beautiful part of the country. But one of the problems being as well, we have an operational base there, Chair. So smack bang in the middle of the property, 50 metres from the house.
Okay, it's not within the house, though.
It's not within the house, but it's right beside it.
Okay. And can I ask you just in relation, was there an offer of 800,000 on it?
I'd have to defer to
Yeah,
I
don't
wasn't
know.
here, Chair, so I couldn't.
I don't know. I'll have to check that out.
Were you
Sorry.
aware of any offers on it, Ms. Campion?
I wasn't involved at that particular time, but I do have all the files relating to it, so I can check back. I can provide that to you in writing.
Chair, I would just say now, and we're talking about governance today, I would be confident we can go back and make a written submission to yourself and to the committee, but if there was an offer made, that the board would have been made aware of that offer.
So there's no sale, and it's sitting idle now for many years. Cottages in the mansion.
Well, the cottages are not being utilised at the moment because the house is not being utilised at the moment. We have offered it out to the Department of Children.
So this, I saw that.
Yeah.
So this country house and the 2 cottages, which are in fairly good condition, I understand.
They are.
Yeah.
So we've undertaken. So we were faced with this conundrum, Chair, as to what to do with the property. As I said, we have the 2 cottages on the outside, we have a working base, we have the house itself, and at the far side of the property we have the salmon index station, right, which is one of the most important research centres, okay? So we have to try and find a solution to where we are with this. We couldn't get it sold. So we commissioned a feasibility study around the future purpose of this property. So we didn't just pause it and not.
Where's that now? Because this is 3 years.
It's
a number of years now.
Well,
6 years. 6 years since it was decided to sell it. 3 years. There's it was on the market. 3 years it sat there. Now we're in a situation where 3 years, another 3 years have elapsed. And I don't see a proposal, a firm proposal today in terms of the use of it.
Can I say there is actually a proposal on the table, and at our last board meeting, our Section 18 board members asked myself and Suzanne Campion to bring forward basically a shortened version of the feasibility study to present to them, so that they could actually decide where this was going to go.
To the 2.
Yes.
To the 2 appointed people by the department.
So it is actually in a process at the moment, Chair.
So there is a firm proposal now.
There is.
We're 6 years, okay? So meanwhile, how much is being spent to date on plans, architects, auctioneers, environmental consultants?
Chair, can I just...
In terms of Ashley House?
In relation to the feasibility study?
No, so how much has been spent in total on it?
To date.
And feasibility study?
Professional fees since IFI took over amount to 45,641.
What period, Ms. Campion?
From mid-2010, 1st to the 7th, 2010 to date.
Okay.
To the end of 2022, but yeah.
And has some woodlands been cleared there?
No.
There's no woodlands cleared?
No.
No native trees have been removed?
There was a natural fall. Oh, yeah.
Can I speak to that, Chairman?
Yeah, please.
We had a query had come in to IFI about that. 1 tree fell on site. It wasn't removed from the site. It was actually cut up and left to biodegrade naturally. We're very conscious. There's an ancient Scots pine woodland there, and I mean, if we were to cut any trees down, we couldn't do that without planning. We wouldn't do it anyway if it can be avoided.
So I believe that the species of trees are very important. Could I ask you that, just to conclude on the Ashley House thing? Has any member of staff holidayed there during that period?
In the cottages or in the lodge?
In either.
I stayed myself in the lodge while a director in the WRBD. And
in the Victorian house?
Not in the house, no. In the cottages. No, in the cottages.
And they go
with my family. I was down holidaying in the west of Ireland, and I paid like anybody else the full amount.
You paid the full amount?
Yes.
How long did you stay there for?
I stayed there for 2 weeks.
Okay. What year was that in?
I stayed, I think, in 20 and possibly 21 again.
Okay, thanks for clarification. Now we're just going to let members back in. If we take maybe, if we take 4 minutes each. Deputy Acoustic first.
Thank you. I just want to stay on Ashley House just for a moment or two. What was it valued at when you put it up for sale? What was the valuation?
I'd have to.
We'd have to go back to the figure. Sorry, I don't have that.
Okay, well, I mean, it was always going to be one of the key issues discussed today. I would have expected those numbers. I wanted to ask as well whether the valuation was internal or whether it was an independent valuation.
I understand it was an external valuation.
Okay. I think we probably all would have expected information both on the valuations and on any offers that were made.
My apologies.
That would be pertinent information. I want to, and Mr. O'Donnell, without personalising it, just one of the phrases that you used earlier was you talked about in any board. You said there's a waxing and waning, and then you described it as a healthy environment to be in. I mean, and that's quite at odds. And I know you were talking about the board, but it's quite at odds to what you said, Ms. Bradley, in terms of there is a significant impact on staff morale. It just stood out to me. It was something that I had to come back on. This is not a natural waxing and waning of the board, is it?
Can I respond to that and just say that I mean, having sat on a number of boards before, I would myself expect that the public would want boards to scrutinise and to challenge executives all the time. I meant in that context. I think that's a very, very healthy environment.
Okay. Yeah, I had to come back to it because it stood out to me. I wanted to ask just around Note 6, remuneration and other pay costs. And so there's details here. One ex gratia payment totaling 3,600, 5 redundancy payments come to 21,600, and 5 settlements totaling over 40,000 in 2021. Before I ask as to the nature of those payments, I just wanted to ask a more general question whether there's any cases pending between IFI staff taken to the Workplace Relations Commission. How many?
3.
3. I know you can't give, you won't want to identify the employees, and it's further details that you can give us on those without identifying the employees.
Really, our organisation is just too small,
Yeah, I won't push you on that. Similarly, on the settlements and redundancy payments, and I realise your organisation is small. These are unusual payments?
Well, I should say to you that the redundancy payments, I should say that we have a cohort of staff that are externally funded through, for research projects. And if they do more than 104 weeks, they're entitled to a statutory redundancy payment, and we have to pay it.
Okay. The 5 settlements, so like I have this ex gratia payment,
Yeah.
5 redundancy payments,
Yeah.
and then 5 settlements.
Yeah, so I'll explain that. 4 of the settlements are for the same thing. Basically, we did a whole big review there a couple of years ago where we were looking at our fleet, and there were some old arrangements in place where people had vehicles but were not needed for operational reasons. In other words, maybe at some stage in the past they were, but we didn't believe that there was a reason for them to have an assigned vehicle, that if they needed a vehicle for work, they could use a pool car. However, when I went back and looked at, how long they had the vehicle for, they'd in some cases had it for over 20 years, right? So I had to buy those out. So I suppose what I always try to do when I address issues like that is to have a once-off scenario that then, that doesn't create a scenario to do. But I should say that was mediated through the WRC.
Okay, and that's helpful. Just one last thing about the ribs. We've paid a lot of money, 3.5 million for these 13 ribs. We've 16 coxswains. You have a staff training budget coming within spitting distance of £500,000.
Yeah.
And only 3 people who are qualified to drive these ribs at night time.
That's not accurate.
And that's the information that I have.
No, that's not accurate. I should say to you that 70% of our training budget is on regulatory training. So that's water safety, boats, first aid. If you're in development, doing cutting trees, all that kind of stuff. So 70% of our budget is on regulatory training, because if you're a coxswain or you're in a boat or you do personal survival techniques, they all have a period of time. All their first aid every 2 years, blah 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 blah. You have the numbers, Mary.
Yeah. So how many people? So we've these 13 ribs, and they're very valuable pieces of kit.
Yeah.
And we want to have them out and in use as much as possible. How many people are equipped to drive them in the night time?
Yes, Deputy. We have 60 advanced coxswains within the organisation, and an additional 35 staff that are qualified to man the vessels. Now, I might add that all the 60 advanced coxswains are trained to do night navigation, radar, and use the vessels at night. I would accept that they don't all do it at night. Most of our work will be at last light and first light in the morning. So it's something that we have identified, and we are bringing forward a familiarisation course, we could say, over the winter periods now, actually in the same location, Killary Harbour, where we'll bring additional staff through nighttime operations, but they are all qualified to do it.
And there's no training impediment to making best use of this equipment?
No.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's
Thank you, Deputy Dillon. 4 minutes.
Chair. Just want to go back to the Donegal insurance issue. What date did IFI establish that they had no insurance on the subsequent?
The 10th of August, the day that the accident occurred.
By what means was this information determined?
So obviously when the accident occurred, the employee contacted our health and safety manager. Health and safety manager obviously informed the logistics manager, who obviously then contacted the insurance company to advise them that an accident had occurred. And it was at that stage they said that vehicle, we haven't been notified that that vehicle is on the fleet insurance.
10th of August 2021 was when it happened.
Yeah.
You were contacted. When did you report to the board?
It was immediately, but I couldn't tell you exactly the date, but it was literally immediately.
Yes, Mr. O'Donnell.
I can just say, no, I know that I reported it to the board, and I reported it in real time as I found out about it.
Yeah.
I initially advised the board, I think the minute will probably match what I'm saying, that I thought it possibly was.
What date did the board
I'd
meet?
I'd have to check and come back to you on that. But as soon as I knew, it wasn't in my board report, it wasn't on the agenda. I found out in real time.
Have you minutes?
Oh, there will be minutes to
Yeah,
that, of
minutes,
course.
yes.
Yeah.
And we're aware that in November a report was brought to the board in relation to this. Is that correct? Of 2021?
There was the report was probably around the mitigation, the processes that we would have put in place to make sure that it didn't happen again.
Yeah.
But
In terms of establishing the facts, when were they brought to the board's attention?
Well, Deputy, I would have to check the record. I told them once I knew there will be a record of that, and that can be provided. There's no issue there. I remember getting a text message at the time, and I was advised that I think it was 7 vehicles, and then by the end of the meeting, I think he updated the board, say it was many more than that. So as soon as I knew it was very serious, and I knew that they needed to know immediately.
Deputy Murphy asked the question in relation to, did you report the insurance incident to An Garda Síochána?
I'll have to check with the logistics manager. I genuinely don't know myself.
You come back to the committee in
Yeah,
relation
yeah,
to that information? Can I also ask what type of insurance discs are displayed on the windows of these 16 vehicles if insurance company didn't issue them? Because I'm sure any employee would look to see if there's insurance discs on their window.
I'll have to check. I don't know.
I can help you. They're normal insurance discs when they come from the lease companies.
Okay. Did the employee of IFI produce his insurance to the Gardaí within 10 days of the incidents occurring?
I don't believe he was asked to do so.
He wasn't asked?
No.
And have you
I can double check that, but I don't believe that was.
with the employee?
Sorry?
Did you discuss this with the employee?
We've had regular discussions with the employee because we wanted to offer support. You can imagine he was extremely distraught.
And was there a crash investigation carried out by IFI?
Yes.
And what was the result of that investigation?
The investigation was that the individual was driving within the speed limit at the time of the accident. The individual was driving behind the car that he crashed into. The car in front of him had quickly indicated to take a turn, and our employee rear-ended that individual and then pushed them into another car. So there's 3 cars involved. But I should say that individual was driving within the speed limit when it happened, and his driving history, which we have through the telematics, is excellent.
And have An Garda Síochána prosecuted anyone within IFI
No.
for having no insurance on their vehicles?
No.
So who will be ultimately responsible for any claims arising from the crash?
IFI will be, because we had hoped, we got into...
So IFI are going to take the hit in relation to this?
Would have to, yes, unfortunately.
And have you any expected costs that will be related to it?
I don't really want to discuss that because obviously there's a case pending. So if I was to put that into the open...
Final question, Chair. Anyone in IFI taking accountability for not insuring these vehicles? Has anyone?
Are you saying, did I know?
Has anyone in IFI been held accountable?
Well, I'm not going to root out an individual on the basis that this was a case of staff being overworked, right? A number of systems failures, and I think rather than putting a culture of blame, I'd rather have a culture of people being free to put up their hand if an error happens. We all make mistakes, and then to make sure that we learn from them and we put in robust systems to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's the culture that I'd like to.
Final question, Chair.
Just very briefly, because
can I just ask Mr. O'Donnell, did you pay full rates in Ashley Cottages when you stayed there for?
Yes.
And who did you pay it to?
I paid it to the person leasing the. It went through. Either went through my bank account. I paid it. I don't know, but I paid the full rates, and how
much did you pay?
Well, I can't tell you off the top of my head. Whatever I was asked to pay, whatever the rate was. No. There's a record of this in our finance department, because I think this came in as a protected disclosure about me already. We're not talking about them. I have no problem saying it. I'm under privilege here today, and it was fully looked at. There was no issue here.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Deputy Murphy.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Just in your opening statement, you said there was a reference to 17 months of intimidation. Is that external or internal intimidation? Can you expand on the nature of it, please?
I suppose well, I mean, I want to be careful because I have spoken to the Gardaí, and I've put it clearly in my statement what I believed was happening to me. There was an internal investigation being managed internally within the organisation, not by me, by our HR department. I started getting letters at home, letters to my work, privately sent to me. I believe there was other significant harassment with me in my role as CEO.
It was exclusively around yourself, was it?
Well, actually, no, I don't believe. I believe other executives as well. Some very, very serious letters written to my own minister about me, making claims about me that were absolutely outrageous, very damaging, and very hurtful. But I suppose when you're managing, in particular, a Garda investigation of the nature that I'm managing, I suppose it's very, very important to have me held in very poor light by somebody, and that's as much as I'd like to say about it.
Okay, right. I want to then just the minister was on the record as saying there was 10 protected disclosures, but they don't appear to have been logged in IFI. The IFI. There's no record of them in IFI.
Okay, so they didn't happen in 2021, and these are the 2021 accounts, but we have our Section 22 protected disclosure report ready to publish on
and
our
how many,
website.
How many protected?
There were 10.
There were 10 in 2022.
Yeah.
That would be enormous in relation to.
Absolutely be enormous. The last time we had one was one in 2019, so there was a plethora of them.
Can I just say to the Deputy about that? While protected disclosures are very, very important around accountability, protected disclosures are often used and weaponised against individuals.
How many were validated?
Sorry?
How many were validated?
I have the report here. It's probably easier to read from it. And sorry, just while we're waiting, I will find it because I've lost the
maybe
papers here.
continue
In relation to Ashley Lodge valuation, I've got that now. It was done by Keane Manny Smith, dated the 25th of September 2017. 800 for the lodge, 225 each of the cottages, coming to 450, and then it was estimating 1.2 million for the entire.
The entire parcel. And what was the offer, the highest offer made on it?
I'm still waiting to get that in.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you have that.
Just in relation to...
I think it was 790, but I don't want to lead you astray.
Parcel.
Yeah.
For the bundle. Thank
Just
you.
in relation to the lodge again, 2015 the contractor was appointed for 4 years, withdrew after a year. Was there a penalty clause for, built into that because it was a 4-year contract? And who ultimately broke the contract?
The tenant had to be removed from the premises, so we had to get legals to get them out. They were not paying their rent, so they were removed from the property. Locks changed.
Okay.
In relation to the disclosures, so we had 7 anonymous disclosures, which alleged a number of different things: misuse of resources, recruitment, welfare, health and safety. Where feasible, the allegations were investigated, and where possible, appropriate corrective action was taken. We had 1 protected disclosure that was completed, and then there was a kind of a follow-up to that one, which was similar in nature from the same person. I understand now I have nothing to do with protected disclosure, so this is very top level.
If it was completed, what was the nature of it?
Basically, the report, which will be published on our website, says a further disclosure was breaches of health and safety protocols.
Then there's 2 others over and above that.
So there was 7 there. There was 1. Then there was a follow-up to that one, which it was on foot of the outcome of the investigation on the first one. It was decided not to progress the second one because it was basically rehashing the same thing, as I understand it, but I don't know any of the details. And at the end of this period, there's 1 disclosure outstanding, and relevant steps in managing disclosure. This disclosure have commenced. So
these are
the details.
were these all from present employees?
Well, the anonymous disclosures are saying they're employees, so I don't know. As I understand, anonymous makes it very difficult. From the named disclosure, I don't know the detail of it. I only know the top level that we will be reporting, so I don't know.
We still don't know how many out of the 10 have been upheld or validated. Is any support staff got that figure?
I suppose the health and safety one, there was an outcome on that. I have details of it.
Just
bear with
I
me.
don't want to take up the meeting here, but just was there 5 upheld? 6, 7? Just the figure.
I have to come back to you. I just have the report that we will publish.
Was most of them upheld, do you think?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Can anyone
I'd say it would be half and half. Because I would know a good few of them.
You said that again, Ms.
I
Bradley?
said it would be about half and half.
Half and half.
Yeah, about
okay.
half and half. So that's what I'm saying. We can get you the details as in how many were taken and how many were upheld or not upheld, and what actions were taken, if any at all.
And could I ask just in relation to maybe Ms. Campion is the one to take the question, in relation to Marrow Sea Angling Club, that it was granted IFA funding. In what year was that?
In 2020.
2020, okay. And did they have a bank account at that stage?
They do now, but they didn't at the time.
In 2020, did they have a bank account? You said they have now?
Yes, yeah.
But did they have one at that point?
No, I said they didn't. No.
Okay.
Can I give you
So, just wait till I just take you through a few questions I have, right? So, I want to try and structure this a little bit. So, if it didn't go into an account, when the money was allocated, where did it go?
Okay, so it was a reimbursement scheme. So,
Right.
I suppose...
But to reimburse them, I'm trying to figure out here now.
So basically...
You know the way this works, and so do I, right? that if you're reimbursing a body, an entity, for fees paid or costs on goods or whatever else, you would have to, and you're sending it to an entity. Okay, so the entity is Maharo Sea Angling Club.
Yes.
Right? Who did it go to? Don't name the person, but who did it go to? Did it go into somebody's bank account?
No.
Where did it
So
go?
what happened was when Maharo applied for the funds, along with all the other people who applied for an Angling for All grant, the grants were, or the applications were evaluated. There were a number of them. So you need to understand this. Sorry if I'm labouring it. The awards were made, or at least the announcement of the awards, they were given a letter of offer. They began all their work like everybody else, and then the IFI admin sent out the bank details. Please fill in the form. We need this to pay you the money. So Maharo came back and said, sorry, we don't have a bank account. So at that stage, I suppose, in hindsight, we should have said, no, we're not giving it to you. But actually, we were very fortunate in that the Angling Council of Ireland, who are the only Sports Council of Ireland funded NGB for angling, agreed to do the procurement for Maharo and then buy the purchase the stuff. Yes, acted as the recipient, and then they bought the stuff. It was €4,000 worth of fishing rods, scales, all small value. They then supplied IFI with full details of the purchases, 3 quotes on everything,
and invoices and receipts.
The invoice, receipts, and proof of payment.
Okay.
And then we paid the Angling Council of Ireland, and the Angling Council of Ireland gave the goods to Maharo. Maharo are now fully established with their bank account.
And the findings of the internal audit in relation to that, is there any other major issues come in that internal audit?
I suppose, like, the way I treat audits is that they're there to help us and to make us stronger. They found, and it's what we've been saying from the beginning, that the angling club was a new angling club at the time of the application.
Yeah, and new clubs can be established.
Yes, and they had been operating, holding events and so on, but they wanted to formally establish.
But would you agree that awarding money to an entity? I'm not trying to pick on the club because they're voluntary people in a voluntary capacity, doing their best in many circumstances.
Absolutely.
With good intention.
Yes.
And we've all been there and done that, unpaid, totally given their time to the community and something that they're passionate about. But would you agree with me, Ms. Campion, that allocating money to a particular entity, and I don't want to cast any aspersions on them, without them having a bank account and evidence of a bank account and the other pieces in place, is not good practice?
I would agree with you, yes. And in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it, but I understood and I thought that with the Angling Council of Ireland, who are the most highly governanced angling NGB in the country, that we were okay. And as well as that, the club had affiliated before the award of funds with their national governing body. So to me, an affiliated body is a club.
And can I ask you just briefly as well, have any other instances like that cropped up?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay. That's fine.
Chair, can I just ask that maybe, given that there has been already, as the CEO has said, the information around your stay in the lodge, can you provide that to us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Very briefly.
Brief questions. Just might ask Mr. Maher from the department. Is it the department's intention that Ashley Lodge and its cottages will continue to be on the market?
Ashley Lodge is in the ownership of IFI. It's not in the department's ownership. Her function was, at the time, and remains, in relation to any sanctions that may be required from Dept to acquire them. When the board decided to put the lodge up for sale, I did secure the agreement of Dept for the sale. The board then changed its mind, and
has the board officially changed its mind?
That's my understanding. That's what communicated to me. I don't have the board minutes.
Can Mr. O'Donnell confirm that?
There's a board decision on this, and there's a second board decision asking me and the executive to go and undertake a feasibility study to consider the future purposing of the property.
You brought that feasibility study before
Sorry,
the board?
I haven't it with me today.
One option
You brought
is-
it before the board?
I've brought it before the old board, yes.
Did they, what was their outcome of that? Did
Their
they accept
outcome-
it or refuse it?
No, they didn't refuse it. Their outcome of that was they asked myself, I think, Suzanne Campion and the retired head of finance to work up some other figures. However, things developed at the board of IFI and it wasn't prioritised. There were other issues so it was sort of parked. However, the new Section 18 individuals are looking at this again now.
Mr. O'Donnell, have you ever
Sorry,
attempted...
now, just, can you come back to us with, as soon as possible, there's a development situation, right? My understanding is there may be a proposal to use it by IFI because you have an operational centre.
Yes, we do.
On site, and the use of it, because obviously it's a very important facility.
Can I just say, Chairman, it's a very important facility and there's a strong political aspect to it as well. I know this is about money and there's a strong connection locally with the property, with people living there. And I accept that the management of it could have been much, much better. It doesn't mean that I would have a knee-jerk reaction and do the wrong thing here because it's very substantial. You asked a question earlier, Chair, about the offer. Ms. Campion has said we were looking for 1.2 million. There was an offer of 800,000 put on it on the 15th of October 2019.
Just one question.
Yeah, Chair, Ashley Lodge is in my constituency, so I have particular interest in relation to
That's why I'm letting you back in.
IFI are into fisheries, not tourism, okay? So I would take that, as a principle. But secondary to that, is IFI now seeking an additional €250,000? Have you got approval for capital expenditure to develop further offices at Ashley Lodge at the minute?
Well, our base, the working base there has been refurbished. And I'd have to ask my colleague Barry Fox here to answer that. But we have undertaken work in the last 6 months on the working base.
Have you got a board approval on that work?
Yes.
There is board approval on it.
Who sanctioned it?
The board approved the capital plan in May 2022, in which the Ballinkill property staff buildings was included. The works include upgrading existing wiring to certification standard, insulation, dry lining of the second floor, installation of disabled toilet facilities and so on.
So this is happening, Chair, at a time when the decision to sell Ashley Lodge and its cottages is still not clear.
How much?
Well, can I say that the decision...
Just a second, how much was approved?
130,
Costs, we've just finalised procurement and the project was coming in at 219,000 before VAT.
Let Jim, Mr. Fox, know in a moment.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to let Mr. O'Donnell, you briefly, and then I want to get in. Mr.
Just to say that the decision around Ashley is quite clear at the moment. It's not for sale. And it's incumbent on myself to try and, along with our current Section 18 board members and the new board, to purpose the property. We have a feasibility study there. We would probably, if the decision was taken not to go with that concept, then the property, I don't want to speak for a board. I'm sure in due course a board would consider that. However, they may consider asking us to go to a full business plan on this. I have yet to. I don't know that, but I have been active in making sure that either way, it's about purposing the property for the public for the future.
Surely it would need a full business plan.
It would, of course, it would. I mean, a feasibility study, right. Chair, as you're well aware.
And there's dimension.
It is.
Okay, Mr. Fox.
Yes, Chair, just maybe to add additional information, the works that are undertaken in Ashley are specifically on our operational base. They're separate to the lodge and the 2 cottages. So this is an operational base for the operations staff and for storing vessels, etc. So it's a separate piece of work that was undertaken apart from the 2 cottages.
You had a question?
Yeah, will you supply us with the cost, the auctioneering fees that have been outlaid on this? Because obviously it has been put up for sale. you know, and give us some sort of a profile of what has been spent on it, what kind of income has come in on it for the last, what, say the last, say 5 years.
Or maybe, I think more appropriate, maybe the past 6 years, going
Yeah.
back to 2017.
Yes, right,
So
since
there was a change then.
2017.
There was a change then, to be honest. Yeah,
We'll do
okay.
that through the written process, Chair.
Okay, and Mr. Maher, you indicated.
No, just to clarify, you know, so I have the full history of all of this here beside me. The most important thing at the time that the sale was mooted and then approved by Dept was retention of the fishery for the local population. For the research purpose, it's the National Salmonid Index, salmon and trout for the whole country. It's got a research station on it. It assists our reporting internationally and data. But the most important thing was that we retained the fishery, not some fishing lodge. And I know it was said earlier, I can't remember by who, that the house was given to the state by the Brabourne family. It was actually sold by the sold. That's an important distinction.
Can you just
And the last thing, sorry, is that when the feasibility study comes forward, I know we're due to get a presentation on it, because the deeper circular also requires myself or somebody in the department to get sanctioned for a change of use.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing will happen without that.
Just to finish where we began, to fish, right? Okay, well, it's all about, or should be about anyway. Just, you know, I know I'm not an expert in it, I know very little about it, but I live in the most inland county, the only county that doesn't touch a county that touches the sea, okay? So, and you're correct, I mean, I remember a lot of freshwater trout in the rivers and everything, and it's, I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's a long time since I had a fishing rod in my hand, riding around on a bicycle, but what I would say to you is this, is that, I mean, it's accepted, and a recent report, I just saw the headline figures of it, shows that, I mean, it really being diminished, you know, and in whatever role in the department and yourselves in terms of, I mean, I'm not too sure how loud you can bang the drum in terms of advocacy. Obviously, protection and management is your thing, but it really needs to be done, because this isn't just a fish life it's going to kill. You know, the habitat's been killed. This is catching up with all the human race as well. There's none of us going to be exempt from this, and just, you know, and look, there's serious issues out right in here today. We've trashed out a lot of them. There's serious governance issues that have arisen. There's a number of different areas that's been covered. They've been given a good trashing out. You know, we need to start. We need to get into a better place. And, you know, I can't overemphasize just, you know, the importance of the role that you're doing, and to wish you well in that, and, you know, to, you know, get things onto a good foot. And the new board, you know, full transparency, full accountability, and we move on from there. All right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And just with that,
really appreciate those words.
So just to conclude, I want to thank the witnesses and the support staff, both from the Department and Inland Fisheries, for the work involved in preparing for today. I want to thank the Controller and Auditor General and the staff for attending, and Mayor as well for the help that you have provided. It is agreed that the clerk would seek any follow-up information and carry out any redactions arising from the meeting. Is agreed. It is also agreed that we note and publish the public statements and briefing notes for today's meeting. Agreed? Okay, so the Committee of the Public Accounts is suspended at 1:30, when we will resume in private session before resuming in public session to address correspondence and other business. And we just ask members to give that their attention at 1:30 sharp, all right? 1:30.